Chu Feng woke half-dead and engaged to the dynasty's deadliest woman. Yi Hongwan would marry him only if he reached the top 10. He had just been beaten nearly to death over a courtesan. Now his own father arrived, ready to break 3 legs. Then a 9-floor creation tower awakened inside his mind. Its power came from yin-yang energy created through dual cultivation. That first night, the tower rebuilt his ruined body completely. By dawn, he had already reached meridian opening. That breakthrough finally gave him a real chance to survive the challenge. But the impossible rise began beneath an unfamiliar carved wooden ceiling. His throat felt raw, his body ached everywhere, and several royal physicians were staring at him with desperate relief. The doctors had not been worried only about their patient, because if this young master died, their own lives could follow. Before Chu Feng understood any of that, a crying maid threw herself against him and nearly smothered him with an enthusiastic embrace. She called him young master, then stared in horror when he asked who she was and why everyone looked terrified. A flood of foreign memories answered the faster than any physician could. The body belonged to Chu Feng, infamous heir of one of the most powerful households in the Great Qin dynasty. The original Chu Feng had built an impressive reputation for drinking, gambling, chasing women, causing trouble, and avoiding anything resembling discipline. His family, meanwhile, was stacked with monsters, whose achievements made his uselessness look even worse. The royal physicians kept checking Chu Feng's pulse as though they expected him to disappear again if nobody watched closely enough. Their relief carried a darker edge because treating a marquis heir meant failure could become a capital crime rather than a bad medical outcome. Schwanger, the maid clinging to him, had clearly spent the night believing she might lose the one person who had once saved her life. That emotional weight made Chu Feng's confusion hurt her more than any ordinary memory lapse would have. When the inherited memories arrived, they did not come as a neat biography, but as fragments of arguments, parties, debts, faces, and family expectations. Chu Feng saw enough to understand why nearly everyone outside the household considered the original owner a walking disaster. He also understood that being useless had never meant being powerless socially. The original heir survived countless scandals because his grandfather's influence and father's military authority shielded him from consequences other youths could never escape. That protection explained both the old Chu Feng's arrogance and the resentment surrounding his name. His father's entrance made the contrast immediate. This was a man who wore armor like ordinary clothing and brought battlefield pressure into a bedroom simply by standing there. The threat to break 3 legs was ridiculous, but the anger underneath it came from genuine humiliation and fear that his son had nearly thrown his life away. Grandfather's intervention revealed another layer of the family, rather than simply rescuing Chu Feng from punishment. The old prime minister protected his grandson so fiercely that even the god of war had learned there was no point arguing once grandfather made a decision. Chu Feng realized he had inherited a family that could become his greatest shield or the source of the largest political explosion in the capital. That mattered because the original fight had already touched another military household. His grandfather served as prime minister and held enormous influence throughout the imperial court. His father was known as the god of war, commanding 300,000 cavalry and carrying a reputation forged across conquered territory. Chu Feng also had 3 formidable older sisters, leaving him as the one family member famous mainly for embarrassing everyone else. The reason his body hurt was simple. The previous night, he fought another noble youth over a courtesan and lost badly. The beating had been severe enough to kill the original owner, leaving the transmigrated Chu Feng to wake inside the wreckage. He had barely processed that inheritance when the bedroom door exploded inward and an armored giant stormed through the splinters. The newcomer was his father, and his first question was whether his useless son had finally died. Seeing Chu Feng alive did not improve the man's mood by much. He demanded to know how the heir of his household could fight over a woman, lose, and disgrace the family in one evening. Then the god of war raised a palm and threatened to break all 3 of his son's legs. Chu Feng had survived one death only to discover that his new father apparently considered castration a reasonable parenting technique. His father never got the chance to land that strike. A smaller silver-haired figure burst into the room and casually slapped the god of war's attack aside. Chu Feng's grandfather immediately began scolding the dynasty's feared commander as if the man were a child caught stealing sweets. The god of war, who could make enemy armies retreat, lowered his head and accepted the lecture without arguing once. That told Chu Feng everything he needed to know about the real hierarchy inside this household. Grandfather hurried to the bed, checked Chu Feng with genuine concern, then switched from affectionate elder to political disaster in a heartbeat. He ordered the guards to prepare weapons and announced that the family responsible for his grandson's injuries should be erased completely. Even Chu Feng's father had to point out that destroying another major estate over a young master's brawl could ignite the entire capital. Grandfather's answer was essentially that the capital's problems were not his concern. Chu Feng quickly intervened before his second life began with a private civil war. He promised to handle the matter himself, which impressed his grandfather enough to cancel the immediate massacre. The old man still wanted compensation, however, and his idea of compensation was anything except modest. The youth who beat Chu Feng had an older sister named Yi Hongwan. Grandfather declared that Yi Hongwan would marry Chu Feng as repayment for what her brother had done. The room went silent the moment her name was spoken. Chu Feng searched the memories he had inherited and immediately understood why his father's expression had become so complicated. Yi Hongwan had grown up around military camps and entered real battle while most children were still learning basic lessons. By her early teens, she was already fighting on active battlefields instead of merely training for them. 3 years earlier, she led 5,000 soldiers deep into enemy territory and broke through 3 fortified cities. When a force of 100,000 closed in, her campaign ended with a massacre that made her name a nightmare across the southern kingdom. Soldiers called her the Great Qin dynasty's #1 female god of slaughter, and that reputation was not decorative. She commanded an army, possessed terrifying cultivation, and carried enough military authority that even Chu Feng's father treated her carefully. To the newly arrived Chu Feng, marriage to that woman sounded less like romance and more like a formal execution date. His father tried to reason with grandfather, pointing out that Yi Hongwan had every reason to reject an infamous wastrel. Grandfather did not care about reputation, military rank, or consent from the opposing household's young master. The Yi family was not a random noble clan grandfather could bully without consequence. Its older generation had commanded armies, and Yi Hongwan herself held troops loyal enough to make any forced marriage dangerous. Grandfather still treated the conflict like a personal insult rather than a strategic crisis. That kind of love was comforting and terrifying in equal measure. The stories about Yi Hongwan were even worse when Chu Feng examined them in detail. Her campaign through 3 fortified cities had not been a lucky raid, but a deliberate deep strike that trapped enemy forces before they could regroup. The final massacre was the reason southern soldiers reportedly panicked when scouts merely mentioned her banner. Whether every rumor was accurate no longer mattered, because the fear surrounding her was real enough to influence armies. Chu Feng's father did not dismiss her as a talented girl. He spoke about her the way one veteran commander evaluated another dangerous commander. That alone told Chu Feng that the marriage proposal could not be solved with charm and family status. When the tower spirit appeared, the shift in his priorities happened, because the system finally offered a path that did not depend on grandfather protecting him. The first floor promised power, but the requirement for yin-yang energy created an immediate ethical and strategic problem Chu Feng could not ignore. He needed willing partners, meaningful constitutions, and enough discretion to keep enemies from learning how his growth actually worked. Yi Hongwan represented the most obvious potential source, yet she was also the least accessible person in the capital. Her marriage condition, therefore, became more than a romantic obstacle. It was tied directly to Chu Feng's survival, cultivation, and ability to stop relying on his family for every crisis. At the Yi estate, Grand Marshal Yi Tianshang's anger came partly from knowing exactly what the old Chu Prime Minister was capable of doing. The 2 veteran families had enough history and armed strength that one death could pull officers, servants, political allies, and military units into the fallout. That was why money could not completely solve the problem once Chu Feng nearly died. His position was brutally simple. Their grandson injured Chu Feng, so their granddaughter would marry him, or consequences would follow. The god of war eventually left to deliver that completely unreasonable proposal in person. Chu Feng made one last attempt to persuade his grandfather that forced marriage rarely produced a peaceful household. Grandfather only smiled, told him Yi Hongwan was beautiful, and walked away as if he had arranged a pleasant dinner instead of a military crisis. Chu Feng remained in bed, wondering how quickly a legendary female general could kill a husband she never wanted. Then, a small, cheerful voice spoke inside his mind and dismissed the so-called god of slaughter as nothing worth fearing. Chu Feng instantly searched the room, but nobody besides the maid was there. The voice came again, drawing his attention inward toward a tiny ancient tower floating inside his consciousness. Black and white energy circled the structure, and its presence felt older than the dynasty, the palace, and perhaps the world itself. The voice introduced herself as Linger, spirit of the Yin-Yang creation tower. For the first time since waking in this body, Chu Feng felt as though transmigration had finally given him an advantage instead of another problem. Linger explained that the tower contained 9 floors, with each level holding increasingly extraordinary treasures and inheritances. Martial arts, pills, weapons, bloodlines, and other resources could be unlocked, as long as Chu Feng accumulated enough yin-yang energy. Naturally, his first question was how that energy was obtained. Linger's answer turned the mysterious artifact into the strangest cultivation system Chu Feng had ever imagined. All things contained yin and yang. The purest usable energy came from intimate union between a man and a woman. Women with unusual constitutions or powerful bloodlines could generate even richer energy and produce greater benefits inside the tower. Chu Feng immediately thought about Yi Hongwan. A woman who had dominated battlefields and earned military command in this world could hardly be ordinary in talent or bloodline. The marriage that looked like a death sentence suddenly contained an opportunity powerful enough to change his entire future. He still had no intention of treating Yi Hongwan like an object, but the tower had certainly made surviving that marriage much more attractive. Across the capital, meanwhile, news of the proposed engagement spread before the Chu household had even settled down. By that afternoon, everyone knew the dynasty's most notorious playboy intended to marry its most terrifying young female commander. At the Yi estate, Chu Feng's father delivered the ultimatum directly to Yi Hongwan's grandfather, former Grand Marshal Yi Tianxiang. The old marshal reacted by cracking a solid wooden table with one furious slap. He called Chu Feng a disgraceful gambler, fighter, and womanizer who had no right to approach his granddaughter. The god of war remained completely calm and reminded him that his own grandson had nearly beaten Chu Feng to death. If Chu Feng had actually died, Grandfather Chu would not have requested compensation or negotiated politely. Everyone in the hall understood that the prime minister might genuinely have burned the Yi estate to the ground. Yi Tianxiang tried offering money, medical expenses, and other compensation instead. Chu Feng's father rejected the offers and repeated the family's demand without softening it. Either Yi Hongwan married his son, or the Yi household could prepare for an entirely different kind of settlement. The two veterans released enough pressure to crack the floor, and the servants began retreating before the argument became a battle. Then a cold female voice ended the confrontation with 4 words. She would marry him. Yi Hongwan entered the hall with black hair tied back, an athletic frame, and an expression so controlled she looked carved from winter. Her grandfather immediately objected, but Yi Hongwan ignored him and addressed Chu Feng's father instead. She would accept the engagement under one condition. The Qilong Rankings tournament would begin in 1 month, bringing together the strongest young talents in the dynasty. If Chu Feng placed in the top 10, Yi Hongwan would wear the wedding dress and enter the Chu household willingly. If he failed, the engagement vanished, and all debts between the two families would be considered settled. Should the Chu family refuse those terms, Yi Hongwan was prepared to let their armies settle the dispute instead. It was an elegant condition, because everyone in the room believed it was impossible. The Qilong Rankings were held only once every 10 years, and even reaching the top 100 required meridian opening cultivation. The top 10 were a different species entirely, with every competitor already standing in the innate realm or near it. Chu Feng, by comparison, had not reached the beginning of body tempering and had spent years damaging himself with excess. Yi Hongwan had transformed a forced marriage into a public challenge the famous wastrel could not realistically pass. After Chu Feng's father left, she explained the logic to her grandfather with the same calm precision she used on campaign. Their family could not afford a direct war with the Chu household, especially when her brother had started the original fight. A 1-month impossible condition bought peace, while allowing the Chu family to retreat after Chu Feng failed on his own. It was calculated, clean, and almost certainly correct, based on everything Yi Hongwan knew about him. What she did not know was that a 9-floor ancient tower had just awakened inside the man she considered hopeless. When the condition reached the Chu estate, Grandfather destroyed another piece of furniture before anyone could stop him. His first solution was to kidnap Yi Hongwan and bring her back by force. Chu Feng's father finally stopped that plan by warning that seizing an active army commander could ignite a rebellion inside the capital. More importantly, he had investigated the brawl that nearly killed his son and found details that did not fit a simple drunken dispute. Chu Feng's meeting with Yi Hongwan's brother felt too convenient. The argument escalated too perfectly, and the guards attacked with lethal intent. Someone seemed to have engineered the entire confrontations, so the Chu and Yi families would turn their strength against each other. Chu Feng entered the hall during that discussion. still pale from his injuries, but mentally nothing like the old wastrel. He agreed with his father and pointed out that the guards had aimed repeatedly at vital points instead of merely beating him. Yi Hongwan's brother was reckless, but killing the Chu heir in public would have been suicidal for his own family. That meant a third party likely wanted Chu Feng dead, and both great houses enraged afterward. His father and grandfather stared at him, as if the beating had somehow knocked intelligence into his skull. The issue had become honor, deterrence, and whether the Chu household could be attacked without consequences. Yi Hongwan's condition offered both families a face-saving exit. If Chu Feng failed publicly, the Chus could claim they accepted fair terms rather than admitting they were forced to retreat. If he somehow succeeded, the Yi household would at least be marrying its daughter to a young man who had proven extraordinary ability. Yi Hongwan therefore designed the challenge so that even the impossible outcome carried political logic. Her grandfather understood the intelligence behind it, even if he hated the idea of placing her name beside Chu Feng's. Back at the Chu estate, the investigation into the brawl gave Chu Feng his first chance to show that the new mind inside the body was different. He remembered how the attackers struck not at arms, shoulders, or legs, but repeatedly toward places that could stop breathing or destroy organs. That detail made the assassination theory much stronger than simple suspicion. His father had noticed the same pattern independently, which gave Chu Feng confidence that he was not imagining the conspiracy. Grandfather's response was immediate, because an attack on the heir inside the capital meant somebody had tested the household's boundaries directly. The offer of rare medicine afterward showed how the old man solved problems he could not punch personally. If wealth could buy Chu Feng a month of cultivation, grandfather was prepared to empty vaults without asking whether the cost made sense. Chu Feng refused because the tower's existence had to remain hidden until he understood who was already trying to kill him, explaining a reality-bending artifact to a politically powerful family. While assassins were watching would create risks he could not calculate yet. Grandfather recovered first and ordered the household network to search the capital until whoever arranged the attack was uncovered. Then he asked Chu Feng directly what he wanted to do about Yi Hongwan's tournament condition. Chu Feng accepted without hesitation. He promised to reach the top 10 within 1 month, stunning his father far more than the conspiracy analysis had. The god of war reminded him that his body was so weak he could barely withstand basic training. Grandfather immediately hit his own son for discouraging the boy and began listing treasures from the family vault. Rare pills, thousand-year herbs, and spiritual medicines were all offered if they could force Chu Feng's cultivation upward. The gesture warmed Chu Feng because his grandfather was willing to drain absurd resources simply to give him a chance. Chu Feng declined the entire offer anyway. Chu Feng told them he had another method, gave no explanation, and left both men wondering what had happened to him overnight. Back in his room, he considered the tower's requirement and the obvious problem that Yi Hongwan was not remotely available for dual cultivation. His maid Schwanger entered with hot water to change his bandages, and Linger immediately became excited. The loyal maid possessed a profound yin body, modest compared with legendary constitutions, but sufficient to unlock the tower's first floor. Chu Feng studied Schwanger with a different kind of seriousness after hearing that. Schwanger's heir's arrival made the tower's requirement suddenly practical, but Chu Feng did not forget that she was emotionally vulnerable around him. The original owner had rescued her from being sold, and gratitude could easily look like consent if he chose to exploit it. That was why he asked directly, instead of treating her loyalty as permission. Her acceptance came with relief rather than fear, changing the scene from system exploitation into a relationship both people knowingly entered. The third prince's reaction across the city established that the brawl had never been an isolated trick. He had expected Chu Feng's death to create a chain reaction, grandfather's retaliation, Yi family resistance, military instability, then political opportunity. Yi Hongwan was the center of his obsession, but weakening two powerful houses at once made the plan useful beyond romance. When that plan failed, he chose professional assassins because subtle manipulation had already lost momentum. The 3-day deadline showed how urgently he wanted Chu Feng removed before the engagement could stabilize. Inside the tower, the Golden Figure's inheritance carried no comforting explanation or gentle training period. Knowledge entered Chu Feng with the force of something ancient that considered a mortal body raw material rather than a person needing mercy. The divine demon's supreme body corrected years of damage by destroying weak tissue first, which made the transformation feel closer to controlled death than healing. The chaos divine demon art then guided the energy, so each breakthrough reinforced the next, instead of leaving a fragile foundation. She had been orphaned, deceived, and nearly sold into a brothel before the original Chu Feng unexpectedly bought her freedom. Despite all his flaws, that one act had earned a loyalty Schwanger never withdrew. Chu Feng asked whether she truly wanted to become his woman, instead of assuming her obedience meant consent. Schwanger blushed, cried from happiness, and accepted without hesitation. Their relationship became intimate that night, and the tower responded immediately to the yin-yang energy released from her special constitution. Inside Chu Feng's consciousness, the ancient structure began humming as the sealed entrance to its first floor finally opened. At the same time, far across the city, the person behind the original brawl learned that Chu Feng had survived. The mastermind was the third prince, a royal son obsessed with Hongwan and determined to prevent anyone else from marrying her. His plan had been to kill Chu Feng, force the Chu and Yi households into war, then approach the weakened Yi family as an ally. Chu Feng surviving ruined that strategy, and the sudden engagement made the prince furious enough to abandon subtlety. He ordered assassins from the Nether Tower to kill Chu Feng within 3 days. Chu Feng knew none of this yet, because the first floor of his own tower had just pulled his consciousness into a place beyond normal space. Chaos stretched in every direction, and a colossal golden figure sat at its center, like an ancient god watching creation itself. The figure opened its eyes and touched one finger to Chu Feng's forehead. 2 inheritances entered him at once: the Divine Demon Supreme Body and the Chaos Divine Demon Art. The power did not simply teach him a technique. It began rebuilding the body that years of indulgence had destroyed. Chu Feng understood instinctively that reckless realm advancement normally created hidden damage. The tower's inheritance avoided that problem by rebuilding the structure before increasing the amount of power inside it. That distinction mattered more than the impressive realm number, because the Chilong rankings would punish any weakness hidden beneath artificial cultivation. Muscles tore and reformed, bones strengthened, meridians opened, and every cell felt as if it were being reforged under unbearable pressure. Chu Feng endured because the tournament clock was already running, and weakness now carried consequences far beyond embarrassment. The transformation carried him through the stages he should have needed years to reach, while the new cultivation art stabilized every breakthrough. By the time his eyes opened again, the useless body he inherited no longer existed in any meaningful sense. Chu Feng rose from the bed and tested one hand, discovering that even a casual squeeze now made the surrounding air snap. He had already reached the first level of meridian opening, the minimum cultivation needed merely to appear on the Chilong rankings. That did not make him stronger than the top 10, but it turned an impossible one-month challenge into something he could finally attack. The Divine Demon Supreme Body also felt far denser than normal flesh, suggesting his actual combat strength exceeded his visible realm. He glanced at the sleeping Schwanger and felt genuine affection beneath the absurdity of realizing their intimacy had unlocked a cosmic inheritance. The maid had stayed loyal to the worst version of him, so Chu Feng decided that whatever happened next, he would not treat her carelessly. Later that night, he left his room with the confidence of someone whose entire physical existence had changed in a few hours. His father was waiting in the courtyard, and immediately noticed that Chu Feng looked far too pleased with himself. The god of war criticized him for becoming intimate with his own maid while recovering from a near-fatal beating. Before the argument escalated, he introduced the woman standing behind him. Her name was Qingyao, a green-clad martial artist assigned to protect Chu Feng at all times after the suspicious attack. Linger nearly screamed inside his mind the moment she examined the new bodyguard. Qingyao carried a diluted bloodline from the ancient divine bird Qingluan, making her another exceptional source of yin-yang energy. Chu Feng kept his expression neutral rather than explaining to his father why his new bodyguard had suddenly become strategically fascinating. He accepted the arrangement and immediately chose his next destination, the pleasure district where the original brawl had happened. Returning so soon served 2 purposes. First, Chu Feng wanted to investigate whoever had arranged the previous night's murder attempt. Second, acting like the same reckless playboy helped conceal how completely his personality and strength had changed. The pleasure district was glowing with music, perfume, lanterns, and expensive entertainment when Chu Feng arrived with Qingyao behind him. The moment customers recognized him, whispers spread through the room about the idiot who had nearly died there and returned the next night. Some laughed until others reminded them that his father commanded 300,000 soldiers and his grandfather feared almost nobody. Madame Fang, the woman managing the establishment, hurried over wearing a professional smile. Chu Feng noticed the brief panic that crossed her face before the smile appeared. He asked whether she had been disappointed to see him alive, making the madame's expression tighten for a fraction of a second. She deflected with polite concern, but the reaction confirmed that something about the previous night made her nervous. Before Chu Feng could press further, another noble youth decided the supposedly useless heir was an easy target. Wang Chong, son of a deputy minister and follower of Bai Bufan, mocked Chu Feng for losing a fight over a woman. Bai Bufan was the grandson of the right prime minister, one of grandfather Chu's biggest political rivals. Wang Chong clearly expected the old Chu Feng to swallow the insult or run home for help. Instead, Chu Feng yawned, waited for him to finish, and slapped him across the face. The strike launched Wang Chong through a table and left one side of his face swollen before anyone understood what had happened. The entire hall went silent because nobody had ever seen the Chu family's playboy move with that kind of speed or force. Wang Chong shouted in disbelief. So Chu Feng walked over and slapped the other side even harder. He warned the young noble that another insult would cost him more than a few teeth. The threat worked because Wang Chong was staring into eyes that no longer belonged to a spoiled coward. Chu Feng then returned to the real reason he had come and asked for the courtesan involved in the previous night's conflict. Madame Fang claimed the woman had suddenly fallen ill and died. Chu Feng immediately understood what that meant. The only direct witness who might explain how the fight began had been removed before she could speak. He ordered another courtesan brought to the best room and headed upstairs, leaving the shocked customers to argue about his sudden strength. Wang Chong, humiliated in public, fled to find Bai Bufan and demand revenge. Inside the private suite, Qingyao stood behind Chu Feng while a beautiful woman in red entered carrying wine. Her name was Hong Ling, and everything about her appearance and behavior was designed to lower a man's guard. She approached with practiced charm, poured a cup, and guided it toward Chu Feng's lips. Linger warned him before the wine touched his mouth. The drink contained a sophisticated poison powerful enough to escape the senses of ordinary high-level martial artists. Chu Feng calmly caught Hong Ling's wrist and accused her of poisoning the heir of the Marquis household. Her confidence collapsed for only an instant before professional instincts took over. A dagger appeared in her free hand and drove straight toward Chu Feng's heart. Qingyao intercepted the blade between two fingers before the point reached his chest. Hong Ling's surprise confirmed what Chu Feng already knew. She had expected a weak target with no meaningful protection. He asked who sent her. Instead of answering, Hong Ling called for backup, and hidden assassins burst from windows, ceiling beams, and decorative screens. 6 black-clad killers attacked together with the coordination of people who had done this many times before. Chu Feng did not even stand. He told Qingyao to kill them, and his new bodyguard answered with the same calm tone she used for ordinary household duties. Her thin sword became a blur of silver as she crossed the room faster than the assassins could reorganize. Every movement ended a life, and within a handful of breaths, all 6 killers were down. The effortless massacre explained why Chu Feng's father had chosen Qingyao personally. Hong Ling attempted suicide the moment she realized capture was unavoidable. She bit toward a hidden poison tooth, but Chu Feng crossed the room before the toxin could finish its job. His new speed shocked her more than Qingyao's swordsmanship had. Chu Feng broke the poisoned tooth and used the Chaos Divine Demon Art to send destructive energy through her meridians. The pain forced Hong Ling to abandon professional silence and identify her organization. She belonged to the Nether Tower, the most infamous assassination network in the dynasty. Qingyao explained that the organization accepted almost any target if the payment was high enough, including nobles and sect leaders. Hong Ling did not know the client's identity, but Chu Feng still wanted the location of the local base. Before she could answer, a sword beam cut through the window from outside. The attack was silent, precise, and aimed directly between Chu Feng's eyes with no safe angle left for escape. Even Qingyao reacted too late to intercept it cleanly. Chu Feng's divine demon supreme body moved before fear could take over. Instead of attempting an impossible dodge, he drove a golden fist directly into the incoming sword energy. The beam shattered against his knuckles. That single result proved his new body could withstand force far above what meridian opening cultivation normally allowed. A masked man in black entered through the window moments later, carrying the calm killing intent of an elite professional. Hong Ling recognized him as Ming Jian and looked relieved to see someone she believed could finish the mission. Ming Jian ignored her and studied Chu Feng instead. He openly questioned the rumors calling the Marquis heir useless after watching him destroy a lethal sword beam barehanded. Chu Feng answered by attacking first. Ming Jian released a stronger wave of sword pressure and knocked him backward several steps, finally drawing a thin line of blood across his fist. The exchange revealed the assassin's cultivation, innate realm. For the first time that night, Chu Feng had found someone whose raw realm was truly beyond his current level. Ming Jian moved to finish him, but Qingyao stepped between them and blocked the killing strike. Her own aura erupted at the same level, revealing that Chu Feng's quiet bodyguard was also an innate realm expert. The two swordsmen traded attacks so quickly that most of the room disappeared under cutting energy and shattered furniture. Neither gained a decisive advantage before Ming Jian reconsidered the situation. He had expected an easy assassination, not a transformed target protected by an equal-level swordswoman. Ming Jian chose retreat over pride. Before leaving, he flicked his sword across Hong Ling's throat, killing his own subordinate before she could reveal anything else. The action told Chu Feng exactly how seriously the Nether Tower protected information about its clients and local operations. Qingyao wanted to pursue him, but Chu Feng stopped her. A desperate, innate realm assassin running through the capital was more dangerous than useful to chase without preparation. Chu Feng returned downstairs to deal with the establishment itself. Madame Fang nearly collapsed when she saw the destroyed room, the bodies, and the blood covering what had been her most expensive suite. Chu Feng told her directly that one of her courtesans had tried to assassinate him and demanded to know whether she had known. She denied involvement, then offered money. When he asked how the establishment intended to compensate him, Chu Feng's rejected the idea that silver alone could settle an assassination carried out under her roof. He ordered the pleasure house shut down immediately. That was when Madame Fang finally revealed the owner behind the establishment, the fifth prince. The information mattered because another royal faction had just been connected to the location where Chu Feng nearly died twice. The Pleasure District investigation also gave Chu Feng a chance to test whether his old reputation could still function as camouflage. People expected him to behave recklessly there, so returning immediately after a near-fatal beating looked foolish rather than suspicious. That let him ask dangerous questions while everyone assumed he was simply too shameless to learn from pain. Madame Fang's first flash of fear mattered more than her prepared words because she had no time to control that reaction. Chu Feng did not yet know whether she helped arrange the attack, accepted money to ignore it, or merely knew powerful people were involved. The dead courtesan removed the simplest trail before he could follow it. Someone had enough access to eliminate a witness inside a prince-owned establishment without causing public alarm. That pushed the conspiracy beyond one spoiled noble and made every employee in the building potentially compromised. Wang Xin's ult was therefore useful despite being annoying. The public slap allowed Chu Feng to preserve his playboy image while quietly demonstrating that the old balance of power around him had changed. Nobody watching could tell whether the strength came from hidden cultivation, a family treasure, or something much stranger. His second slap was not needed to prove physical power, but it ended the social challenge decisively and prevented a longer argument from delaying the investigation. When Hong Ling entered upstairs, Qingyao never relaxed, even though Chu Feng deliberately acted comfortable. The assassin's cold wrist, controlled breathing, and precise movement did not match a courtesan trained only to entertain guests. Linger's poison warning confirmed the trap before Chu Feng had to rely on those smaller signs. The toxin itself revealed professional planning, because ordinary poison would have been too easy for a noble household to detect afterward. Whoever paid the Nether Tower expected the assassination to succeed cleanly enough that the death could still be blamed on Chu Feng's reckless lifestyle. The 6 hidden killers were positioned to finish the job if poison failed. Their placement around exits also showed that Hong Ling was bait rather than the entire operation. Qingyao's efficiency surprised Chu Feng because his father had introduced her with almost no explanation of rank or history. The god of war apparently considered an innate-level bodyguard an ordinary precaution once somebody targeted his son. That realization made Chu Feng wonder how many other terrifying people in the household were hiding behind simple job titles. Ming Jian's appearance answered another question about the Nether Tower's discipline. He did not rush in until the lower-level team failed, meaning he had probably been observing the entire attempt from outside. His sword beam targeted Chu Feng first, rather than Qingyao, because completing the contract mattered more than preserving subordinates. When the beam broke against Chu Feng's fist, Ming's surprise was tactical, not merely emotional. His information had described a helpless playboy, yet the target suddenly possessed durability strong enough to invalidate the mission plan. That intelligence failure would inevitably travel back through the organization if Ming Jian escaped. Chu Feng still let him go, because trapping an innate assassin without knowing the full environment could create more danger than information. Hong Ling's execution proved that the organization had contingency rules for captured agents. It also deprived Chu Feng of the location he wanted, making the later family intelligence operation necessary rather than convenient. The fifth prince's ownership of the pleasure house complicated the conspiracy without proving he ordered the original attack. A royal business could host assassins without the prince knowing every private room, but it also gave enemies a perfect place to hide behind political protection. Before he could decide what to do with that fact, shouting erupted from the main hall below. Wang Chong had returned with the person he served. Bai Bufan entered surrounded by followers, furious that Chu Feng had publicly beaten one of his men. From the second-floor railing, Chu Feng mocked the noise and asked whose dog was barking downstairs. Bai Bufan demanded an explanation, arguing that hitting his follower was the same as insulting the owner. Chu Feng repeated the comparison, then jumped from the balcony and landed directly in front of him. He slapped Bai Bufan across the face before the noble youth could react. Then Chu Feng calmly explained that if Wang Chong was the dog, tonight he had decided to hit the owner as well. Bai Bufan's humiliation exploded into rage. He ordered his personal guard, a half-step innate expert, to kill Chu Feng on the spot. The guard lunged for Chu Feng's throat and died before his hand arrived. Qing Yao's sword left a single fatal point in his forehead, ending the attack so cleanly that Bai Bufan stopped shouting mid-command. Slow applause came from the entrance before anyone could recover. A royal figure in a python robe walked into the hall surrounded by eunuchs and guards. The fifth prince, Xiao Shan, had arrived at the pleasure house he secretly owned. Everyone in the hall dropped to their knees except Chu Feng. An old eunuch demanded respect, but Chu Feng asked why he should kneel after nearly being murdered inside the prince's property. Xiao Shan waved away the insult and offered compensation with a smile designed to keep the situation under control. Chu Feng named his price, 10 million silver taels. The number stunned the entire hall because it was closer to extortion than compensation. Bai Bufan called him insane, while even the fifth prince's practiced smile finally showed strain. Chu Feng reminded Xiao Xian that refusing meant Grandfather Chu could come negotiate personally. That possibility changed the prince's calculation immediately. 10 million silver was painful, but a confrontation with the prime minister inside a royal-owned pleasure house could become catastrophic. Xiao Xian ordered the money delivered. Chu Feng accepted the banknotes, thanked the prince with complete shamelessness, and walked away richer than he had been an hour earlier. The fifth prince kept smiling until Chu Feng was gone, then privately swore to make him repay the humiliation many times over. Outside the pleasure district, Chu Feng encountered yet another person carrying a personal grudge. Yi Hao, Yi Hongwan's younger brother and the youth from the original fight, charged toward him demanding they settle the score. Chu Feng slapped him down before the argument could restart. This time, however, the conversation mattered more than the humiliation. Chu Feng explained that someone had manipulated both of them into fighting, then tried to turn the brawl into murder. If Chu Feng had died, Grandfather Chu would have treated the Yi family as responsible, and both households could have destroyed each other. Yi Hao's anger faded when he realized how easily he had been used as somebody else's weapon. Chu Feng therefore extorted compensation, instead of accusing Xiao Xian of attempted murder without evidence. The 10 million silver payment was useful money, and a test of how much the prince feared grandfather's retaliation. Xiao Xian's willingness to pay confirmed that the Chu family's political threat was real enough to move royalty. Yi Hao's confrontation afterward mattered because he was the only known participant from the original fight still alive and accessible. Chu Feng could have beaten him again and left, but explaining the setup gave the Yi household a reason to investigate from its side. If Yi Hao found inconsistencies in his own guards or companions, two family networks might uncover the mastermind faster than one. At the Misty Rain Pavilion, Chu Feng's attention shifted from conspiracy to resources because survival required more than identifying enemies. The Beast Arena showed him a market where powerful people were literally treated as assets. Dolly's condition made that brutality useful to Chu Feng, but he still noticed the difference between recruiting a person and purchasing equipment. That was why he wagered for Dolly directly, instead of simply offering money after the match. Winning gave him legal control under the pavilion's own rules, while the later bloodline awakening could create loyalty based on opportunity rather than chains. Dolly's concern before the fight also suggested he had not been emotionally broken by the arena, despite being raised there as property. Chu Feng warned him to think before acting again, then added that future meetings should include the title brother-in-law. He left Yi Hao sitting in the street with far more to process than a swollen cheek. By the end of the evening, Chu Feng had survived assassins, humiliated several nobles, extorted a prince, and uncovered multiple signs of a larger conspiracy. He also carried 10 million silver taels that had not existed in his pocket when the night began. On the walk back, a 9-story building of golden silk wood caught his attention. Qing Yao identified it as the Misty Rain Pavilion, a century-old trading power that could sell nearly anything for the right price. Martial arts, weapons, exotic beasts, intelligence, and rare treasures all passed through its hands, Protected by influence even royalty respected. The pavilion had also opened a new beast-fighting arena that very night. Chu Feng looked at his new fortune, then at the glowing building, and decided the investigation could survive a little shopping. A hostess led Chu Feng and Qingyao through a long corridor that opened into an underground coliseum packed with screaming spectators. Two shirtless fighters were already trading bare-handed blows in the central pit, while wealthy guests shouted for blood from the stands. The match ended when one fighter struck the other's temple, hard enough to leave no question about whether he would stand again. Chu Feng expected beasts, but the hostess calmly explained that the pavilion treated the slaves raised for combat as little different from animals. The answer bothered him, although he had no time to solve the brutality of this world, while his own survival clock was still running. The announcer soon introduced the arena's real attraction. A huge young man named Dolly stepped through the iron gate with the build of a siege weapon and the expression of a friendly farmhand. His cultivation was only the third level of meridian opening, yet his physical presence made stronger-looking fighters hesitate. The pavilion promised 3 breakthrough sky pills to any warrior under 30 who could defeat him. Each pill greatly increased a cultivator's chance of advancing into the innate realm, making the reward valuable enough to draw immediate challengers. The first meridian opening fighter barely finished introducing himself before Dolly punched through both arms and launched him from the platform. Higher-level challengers followed, and every one of them discovered the same problem. Dolly's realm was ordinary, but his raw strength made normal cultivation comparisons almost meaningless. Even a 7th-level meridian opening fighter survived only a few exchanges before his ribs gave way. The crowd finally stopped volunteering victims. Chu Feng, however, was no longer watching Dolly as an opponent. Linger identified the giant's constitution as innate divine strength, a rare body born with monstrous physical power. His bloodline had not even awakened yet. Once awakened, Linger predicted that Dolly's strength would increase dramatically enough to threaten innate realm experts with pure force. Chu Feng immediately wanted him. He asked Qingyao for a mask, so the capital would not connect the useless young master with whatever happened in the arena. Minutes later, a bronze-masked Chu Feng stepped onto the platform, while hiding his identity, but not his meridian opening aura. The audience laughed when they sensed only first-level cultivation from the thin challenger facing the arena's human fortress. Dolly himself warned Chu Feng to leave because he did not want to cripple someone obviously weaker. The concern made Chu Feng like him even more. Instead of walking away, he told the announcer he did not want the pills if he won. Chu Feng decided he wanted Dolly personally. The request stunned the arena because everyone else valued 3 breakthrough pills far above 1 slave fighter. The announcer initially refused, explaining that Dolly belonged to the pavilion and was not listed for sale. Chu Feng told him to ask the pavilion master whether one fighter was worth a potentially valuable future relationship. After a private consultation, management accepted the wager. If Chu Feng defeated Dolly, ownership of the giant would transfer to him. High above the arena, a beautiful woman in palace robes watched the masked challenger with growing interest and ordered someone to investigate him. Dolly's expression changed once the agreement became official. He stopped trying to protect Chu Feng and launched himself forward with enough force to crack stone beneath his feet. The crowd expected a single punch to end the match. Chu Feng met it head-on. Their fists collided and a shockwave rolled across the arena. But Chu Feng did not move backward even half a step. The laughter across the arena vanished immediately. A first-level meridian opening fighter had just absorbed the full strike of someone who had been one-shotting opponents several levels higher. Dolly stared for only a moment before excitement replaced disbelief. He attacked again, and Chu Feng answered with the same direct style. For several exchanges, they fought without weapons or techniques, testing body against body, while every impact shook the platform. Dolly's fists gradually went numb. Chu Feng, on the other hand, was finally learning how durable the Divine Demon Supreme body truly was under real pressure. He let the test continue until he had enough information. Then Chu Feng released only part of his full physical power and threw one clean punch. Dolly crossed both arms to block, but the strike broke through the defense and launched his enormous body off the platform. He crashed into the stone below and lost consciousness. The announcer needed several moments before officially declaring Chu Feng the winner and transferring Dolly to him. The victory should have ended the matter. The giant did not enjoy crippling weak opponents for entertainment. He fought because the pavilion put him in the pit, and because strength was the only value the system around him recognized. Chu Feng's first collision with Dolly tested a different aspect of the Divine Demon Supreme body than Ming Zhen's sword beam. The sword attack measured resistance to concentrated energy. Dolly measured raw structural strength, impact tolerance, balance, and how well the new body transferred force through the ground. Every exchange, therefore, gave Chu Feng information he could use before facing tournament fighters with unknown styles. Dali's increasing excitement also mattered, because he finally encountered someone willing to meet his strength without fear or exploitation. When Chu Feng ended the match, using only part of his physical power, avoided unnecessary damage to the person he wanted to recruit. The broken arms were severe but recoverable, especially with the Chu family's medical resources waiting outside the arena. Yang Tianqi's demand immediately transformed the victory into a political test. The young noble did not negotiate, as one owner approaching another. He assumed ancient family status automatically overruled whatever agreement Chu Feng had just earned publicly. Refusing the offer therefore protected more than Dali. It established that Chu Feng would not let another faction redefine ownership simply because its name carried history. The old servant's innate cultivation also gave Chu Feng a far better benchmark than the arena challengers had provided. He discovered that his body could survive an expert several realms higher, but only by spending a large amount of energy and accepting real internal pressure. That limit was important because durability without stamina could still get him killed in a longer tournament fight. The final punch proved his offense could cross the realm gap once. Not that every innate opponent had suddenly become easy. Dropping to one knee afterward reminded Chu Feng that the divine demon supreme body was powerful, not infinite. Qingyao saw the exhaustion clearly and stayed close while they left, even though the crowd focused only on the impossible victory. The purple gold invitation reflected the pavilion master's interest in that contradiction. A meridian opening youth who could kill innate experts was valuable enough that the trading organization wanted another chance to observe him. Instead, a richly dressed young man pushed through the crowd with guards and demanded to buy Dali immediately. Behind him followed an elderly servant whose sleepy posture could not hide the pressure Chu Feng's instincts sensed from him. The young noble introduced himself indirectly through a guard as Yang Tianqi, heir of one of the dynasty's 5 great ancient families. The Yang family carried enough history and strength that even princes treated them carefully. Yang Tianqi considered that background sufficient reason for Chu Feng to hand over the fighter. He offered money and the supposed honor of friendship with the Yang clan. Chu Feng refused both offers without hesitation. When Yang Tianqi demanded respect for his family name, Chu Feng responded that he did not care whether they were Yang, sheep, or dogs. Then he told the entire group to leave. The insult pushed Yang Tianqi past anger. He ordered the old servant to break Chu Feng's limbs, cut out his tongue, and make an example of him. The elderly man finally opened his eyes. Innate realm pressure crashed across the arena, hard enough to make spectators struggle for breath. He moved with speed far beyond the previous challengers and drove a withered claw toward Chu Feng's skull. Qingyao reached for her sword, but Chu Feng moved first. Golden light erupted from the divine demon supreme body as he raised a fist to meet the attack directly. The collision shattered stone around them and forced Chu Feng backward across the platform. He stopped after several steps, shook off the invasive energy, and smiled despite the pain running through his arm. The old servant had moved only a few steps, but his expression had changed completely. He was an innate realm expert several levels deep, yet a meridian opening youth had survived his direct strike without serious injury. Qingyao prepared to intervene with her sword. Chu Feng ordered her to stand down, because he wanted this fight as another measurement of his new body. The old expert attacked with greater force, sending claw strikes from every angle and abandoning the restraint he used in the first exchange. Chu Feng responded by activating the divine demon supreme body fully and trading attacks instead of retreating. The arena became a battlefield of shockwaves, shattered flooring, and spectators scrambling away from stray energy. The old man's attacks finally began landing, but the damage was far less than his realm should have produced. Shallow cuts closed with abnormal speed, and the expert realized he was fighting a body that refused normal martial logic. Desperation pushed him toward one final strike. He concentrated everything into a killing claw aimed at Chu Feng's chest, willing to trade defense for certainty. Chu Feng saw the opening and chose not to dodge. The claw landed squarely, shredded his clothing, and left only shallow marks across the golden-lit skin beneath. The innate expert's confidence broke in that instant. Chu Feng told him his power was too weak and answered with a full-force punch to the chest. The strike emptied most of Chu Feng's remaining strength, but it also killed the old servant on the spot. An innate realm expert collapsed before thousands of witnesses, defeated by someone publicly showing only meridian opening cultivation. Chu Feng dropped to one knee afterward, pale and exhausted from pushing his body far beyond what his realm could sustain comfortably. Qingyao moved beside him, but Yang Tianqi was already backing away in terror. His guards had lost any desire to fight after watching their strongest protector die from a single decisive counterattack. Chu Feng approached slowly until Yang Tianqi fell backward and tried hiding behind his family name. Chu Feng placed a boot on the young noble's face and pressed him into the stone in front of the entire arena. He repeated that the Yang family name did not give its heir permission to take what belonged to someone else. Then he ordered Qingyao to collect Dali because they were leaving. Before they reached the exit, the pavilion hostess stopped them with a message from the mysterious woman watching above. The pavilion master wanted to meet Chu Feng privately. He declined for the moment. Instead, the hostess handed him a purple gold invitation to a grand auction scheduled 3 days later. Chu Feng accepted the invitation and left the arena carrying a new fighter, a new enemy, and a public mystery surrounding his masked identity. Back at the Chu estate, Dali was placed in a side courtyard and treated for the injuries from the match. Chu Feng asked Linger how to awaken the giant's dormant bloodline. She provided an ancient medicinal bath formula, requiring several rare ingredients and 7 days of continuous soaking. If successful, the innate divine strength constitution would begin awakening, and Dali's physical power would multiply far beyond its current level. Chu Feng handed the formula to Qingyao and told her to use the family vault or buy whatever was missing. The household had enough money that survival mattered more than careful budgeting. His father appeared soon afterward and immediately noticed the claw marks across Chu Feng's chest. The god of war's mood darkened as he demanded an explanation from Qingyao. She knelt and accepted responsibility for failing to prevent the injury. Chu Feng stopped his father from punishing her and explained that he had chosen to fight the attacker himself. When asked who had done it, he casually mentioned an innate realm expert from the Yang family. Then he added that the man was already dead because Chu Feng had killed him. His father's expression finally broke. The god of war seized Chu Feng's wrist and sent energy through his body to verify the claim. What he found was a son who had been practically uncultivated the previous day, now standing firmly in meridian opening. That transformation alone made no sense. Combining it with a confirmed victory over a far stronger innate expert made the situation absurd. His father stepped back and asked the question. Chu Feng had hoped nobody would ask so soon. Was he really his son's? Chu Feng covered the dangerous moment with humor, insisting he was completely authentic and not accepting returns. The answer did not explain anything. But the god of war eventually chose not to press further. He told Chu Feng that the Qilong rankings were 1 month away and that he would be watching closely. For the first time in the inherited memories, his father's back carried something closer to expectation than disappointment when he left. By the next morning, the capital had turned the masked arena fighter into its favorite rumor. Thousands of witnesses claimed a meridian opening cultivator had killed an established innate realm master in public combat. Every major faction wanted to know who the masked genius was and which household or sect had trained him. At the Yi estate, even Yi Hongwan reacted to the report. She understood better than most how impossible such a victory should be, and privately admitted that the feat exceeded ordinary genius. Her curiosity vanished when her grandfather mentioned that Chu still intended to enter the Qilong rankings and reach the top 10. Based on everything she knew about the playboy, that promise still sounded ridiculous. Back at the Chu estate, Chu Feng continued cultivating with Schwanger and refining the foundation his first awakening had created. The relationship deepened beyond the system benefit, although Linger remained delighted that Schwanger's constitution continued feeding the tower. One morning, the bedroom door exploded inward again, before Chu Feng could enjoy any privacy. A woman in red crossed the room almost instantly and stopped beside the bed. Chu Feng recognized her from inherited memories as his second sister, Chu Lingyan. She was famous throughout the capital for a violent temper, fierce loyalty to family, and a habit of breaking anyone who bullied her younger brother. The moment she confirmed Chu Feng was alive, relief turned directly into anger over finding him in bed with Schwanger. Lingyan grabbed his ear and reminded him that she had crossed thousands of miles after hearing he nearly died. For all the teasing and pain, Chu Feng understood immediately how much she cared. Then Linger discovered something far more complicated. Chu Lingyan possessed the Southern Bright Departure Fire Body, a top-tier fire constitution with extraordinary value to the tower. Chu Feng mentally rejected the suggestion at once, because Lingyan was his sister. Linger calmly informed him that the two had no blood relation. That revelation made Chu Feng look at Lingyan too long, which she immediately noticed. She twisted his ear harder and accused him of thinking something indecent. Chu Feng denied everything, with the least convincing innocence possible. The situation became even more awkward when Lingyan refused to leave while he dressed because she had helped raise him as a child. A badly timed blanket incident finally convinced her that some childhood rules no longer applied. The fearless warrior fled the room blushing, while Chu Feng quietly decided this household needed stronger doors and clearer boundaries. Once everyone was dressed, Lingyan moved to the real reason she had returned. She wanted to know whether Chu Feng truly intended to marry Yi Hongwan under that humiliating top 10 condition. Lingyan considered the challenge an elegant way for the female commander to reject him publicly. Chu Feng simply answered that nobody knew the result until he tried. His sister narrowed her eyes and placed a hand on his shoulder to inspect his cultivation herself. The moment she sensed meridian opening energy, she nearly shouted the roof down. Chu Feng had gone from a nearly dead non-cultivator to a ranking-eligible realm before she could even travel home. He offered an intentionally useless explanation about becoming a late bloomer. Shock quickly turned into pride. Lingyan declared that if Chu Feng reached the top 10 and Yi Hongwan still refused, she would personally drag the bride into the wedding chamber. Chu Feng asked whether she could actually overpower the dynasty's female god of slaughter. Lingyan dismissed the concern with enough confidence to make him suspicious. Linger supplied the answer inside his head. Lingyan's return changed Chu Feng's understanding of his family almost as much as Uncle Fu would later. The inherited memories knew her as a protective older sister who solved bullying with broken bones. But those memories never explained her real cultivation. Her void-piercing realm meant the Chu household had hidden a prodigy strong enough to dominate many sect elders, while letting the capital remember only her temper. That concealment suggested grandfather had been keeping family strength private for years, not merely reacting to Chu Feng's recent problems. Linger's discovery that the siblings were not related by blood created a separate complication Chu Feng chose not to act on while larger threats were approaching. Whatever the tower wanted, Lingyan had spent years treating him as family, and had crossed thousands of miles because she heard he was hurt. That loyalty mattered more immediately than the value of her constitution. Her decision to attack the Nether Tower before breakfast showed the same family philosophy grandfather followed. The Chu household did not treat assassination as a legal dispute to be documented and forgotten. Anyone who touched one of them had to believe retaliation would be immediate, personal, and disproportionate. The hidden restaurant base proved why the Nether Tower had survived so long. Nothing about the busy dining hall suggested professional killers operated behind the walls, and ordinary customers created perfect cover against large-scale raids. Lingyan destroyed that protection by evacuating civilians before attacking. Her command to leave sounded violent, but it prevented innocent diners from being trapped. Once cultivation pressure started tearing the building apart, the drunk noble who ignored the warning became an example that convinced everyone else to move faster. Ming Jian's confidence on the upper floor came from the base's layered defenses rather than simple arrogance. He had escaped Qingyao once, returned to friendly territory, and now stood among multiple innate assassins under Shadow Serpent's command. From his perspective, Chu Feng had foolishly entered the place, where the Nether Tower controlled terrain, numbers, and exits. Chu Lingyan had already reached the void-piercing realm. Chu Feng nearly sprayed tea across the table. Innate realm was already elite, followed by golden core and primordial spirit. Void-piercing stood above all of them and allowed experts to cross vast distances through the sky. His second sister was in her 20s and already operating on a level that made the innate expert he killed look insignificant. Before Chu Feng recovered from that realization, Lingyan learned about the Nether Tower assassination attempt. The floor cracked under the pressure of her killing intent. She grabbed Chu Feng by the collar and announced they were going to destroy the local assassin base immediately. Chu Feng asked whether she even knew where it was. Lingyan explained that the Chu family's intelligence network had already located the supposedly hidden stronghold. The nation's #1 assassination organization was about to receive a morning visit from the angry sister of its target. Lingyan dragged Chu Feng across the capital and stopped outside a crowded upscale restaurant. The location looked completely ordinary, which was exactly why the Nether Tower used it. Inside, customers were eating peacefully until Lingyan walked to the center of the hall and ordered everyone who valued life to leave. Her voice shattered dishes and sent wealthy diners racing toward the exits before anyone could ask for clarification. One drunk noble made the mistake of flirting with her on the way out. Lingyan slapped him through several tables and told the surviving members of his group to disappear. An older companion wisely recognized her aura and removed everyone before the bodyguard could make the situation worse. The restaurant owner emerged sweating and insisted the establishment was innocent. Lingyan released enough pressure through one footstep to expose the lie. She announced that the Nether Tower had accepted a contract on her younger brother and that the local base would answer for it. A familiar voice responded from the upper floor. Ming Jian appeared with his sword. No longer surprised that the Chu household had found them, he mocked the siblings for arriving with only 2 people. Lingyan replied that she alone was already more than enough. A second man emerged behind Ming Jian, pale-faced and surrounded by a freezing corpse-like aura. The assassin was known as Shadow Serpent, commander of the Nether Tower's capital operations. He examined Lingyan with disgusting interest and ordered his subordinates to capture her alive. Chu Feng almost pitied him for not understanding what kind of person he had just threatened. Assassins poured from hidden positions until more than a dozen meridian opening and innate realm killers surrounded the siblings. Mingzhen focused on Chu Feng and promised the luck from the previous night would not save him twice. Chu Feng told Lingyan that he wanted the swordsman for himself. She checked whether he was serious, then agreed to handle everyone else. Chu Feng launched the first attack himself. Ming Jian answered with the same innate realm sword technique that had wounded him during their first encounter. This time Chu Feng did not punch the blade away. He allowed the strike to reach his throat. Metal rang against the divine demon's supreme body, and the sword bent without cutting his skin. The improvement from his continued cultivation was so dramatic that Ming Jian froze in disbelief. Chu Feng's fist arrived before the assassin recovered. One strike crushed through protective energy, collapsed the swordsman's chest, and hurled him through tables into the restaurant wall. Ming Jian survived long enough to stare at Chu Feng in terror and insist the real wastrel could never possess such strength. Chu Feng ended the conversation before the assassin could turn that suspicion into anything useful. With Ming Jian removed, Lingyan finally moved against the rest of the base. She did not bother drawing a weapon. Red afterimages crossed the restaurant, followed by snapping bones and brief screams, as trained killers fell faster than they could coordinate. Within a few breaths, the capital branch's elite force was gone. Lingyan stood among the bodies without a visible stain on her red clothing. Only Shadow Serpent remained standing afterward. Chu Feng's second confrontation with him, therefore, served as a direct progression test. The sword that wounded his fist the night before could no longer cut his throat after further refinement. That was visible proof that the divine demon supreme body was still strengthening between realm breakthroughs. Not only when the number of open meridians changed, Ming Jian's collapse also removed the one assassin who had personally observed both Chu Feng and Qingyao during the Pleasure House battle. The remaining killers now knew the rumors were wrong, but had almost no time to adjust before Lingyan attacked them. Her speed turned coordination into a weakness, because the formation depended on members surviving long enough to support each other. Once the first few assassins vanished from their positions, the entire encirclement lost structure. Shadow Serpent's half-step golden core surge revealed the ceiling of the capital branch. Against most young cultivators, that level would have been overwhelming. Against Chu Lingyan, it barely qualified as resistance. The blind elder's appearance finally introduced someone who could force her to take the situation seriously. His lack of aura was more frightening than obvious pressure, because it meant he controlled his power well enough to hide it from weaker senses. Even Chu Feng detected him, only because the divine demon supreme body reacted to danger before his cultivation mind understood what was there. The elder's offer to settle showed that the Nether Tower was practical when the cost of a contract became too high. He was willing to protect the organization's reputation with promises rather than continue feeding experts into the Chu family's retaliation. Lingyan rejected that logic because the original contract had already crossed the one boundary she cared about most. Her brother had nearly died. No later promise could make that acceptable. The confidence had vanished from his face. He burned his cultivation recklessly and pushed toward half-step golden core, releasing toxic energy in one desperate counterattack. Lingyan answered with a simple punch. Her fist erased the technique, broke through his defense, and sent him crashing across the ruined hall. Shadow Serpent finally realized her strength exceeded golden core by several entire realms. Lingyan lifted him by the throat and asked Chu Feng what should be done with the man who ordered his death. Before Chu Feng answered, the divine demon supreme body sensed another presence hidden deeper inside the building. This one felt far more dangerous than every assassin they had already defeated. Chu Feng called into the shadows and told the hidden observer to come out. A gentle laugh answered from the darkness. An elderly blind man in gray clothes stepped forward carrying a bamboo cane and showing no obvious aura at all. That lack of pressure made Lingyan more cautious, not less. She could not read the man's cultivation even with void-piercing senses. The old assassin politely introduced himself as an elder of the Nether Tower and greeted both Chu siblings by title. Lingyan identified his realm quietly, Grandmaster. That level stood above void-piercing and represented the kind of individual who could challenge armies or found major martial powers alone. Shadow Serpent begged the elder for help before realizing that the woman choking him was already several major realms above his own level. The blind elder proposed a settlement. The Nether Tower accepted contracts as business, he argued, and the Chu siblings had already killed enough people to balance the matter. He personally promised that the organization would never approach Chu Feng again. Lingyan laughed at the offer. Then, she broke Shadow Serpent's neck and dropped the body at the elder's feet. Taking money to murder her brother was not a misunderstanding. She intended to settle with a handshake. The air around the blind elder's cane began warping as his patience disappeared. He asked whether she truly wanted a fight to the death with the Nether Tower. Lingyan stepped forward until heat began smoking across the damaged floor. She told him he was overestimating his organization if he thought surviving the morning was still negotiable. Then Lingyan attacked the Grand Master directly. Lingyan crossed the ruined restaurant like a red comet, while the blind Grand Master swept his bamboo cane through dozens of overlapping afterimages. Each shadow of the weapon carried enough force to pulverize stone, yet Lingyan met the storm without slowing. Their first serious collision released a silent pressure wave that shredded pillars and made the entire building groan around them. The old man expected his realm advantage to decide everything quickly. Instead, blue-red fire crawled across his bamboo cane the moment it touched Lingyan's power. The weapon burned apart almost instantly. He recognized the Southern Bright Departure fire and finally understood why a young void-piercing cultivator dared challenge him directly. Lingyan mocked his rank and asked whether he had eaten his way into Grand Master if he could not even withstand her flames. Chu Feng watched from a safer distance, while Lingyan excitedly confirmed that the fire could damage far more than ordinary flesh. The blind elder abandoned caution. He released the Nether Tower's gray death energy and pushed his cultivation to the 5th level of Grand Master. The pressure alone blew away what remained of the restaurant and made breathing difficult even for Chu Feng's reforged body. Lingyan gathered her flames for another collision. Before she moved, a tired old voice drifted in from the destroyed entrance and criticized the Nether Tower for threatening the Chu family's young master. The blind elder's power recoiled into his body immediately. Chu Feng turned and saw Uncle Fu, the household butler he remembered mainly for gardening and walking slowly around the estate. The old servant looked fragile enough to lose a fight with strong wind. Lingyan relaxed the moment she saw him. She casually asked why grandfather had allowed him away from the garden, which only made the assassin's growing fear more confusing. Uncle Fu shuffled over, checked Chu Feng's condition, and observed that the recent beating had at least made the young master sturdier. The blind grandmaster demanded to know who he was. Uncle Fu finally looked in his direction. One lazy palm pressed toward empty air. The ground beneath the assassin collapsed several meters, as if an invisible mountain had dropped onto him. Bones cracked throughout the grandmaster's body before he could form a complete defensive technique. His nether death energy disappeared against Uncle Fu's pressure without slowing the attack. The dying man identified the butler's cultivation with disbelief. Great Grandmaster, a realm above his own. Chu Feng silently reevaluated every servant in the household. Apparently, the old man who pulled weeds could crush a grandmaster into the floor while looking mildly inconvenienced. Uncle Fu stepped onto the assassin's back and asked one question. Who had hired the Nether Tower to kill Chu Feng? The blind elder refused, insisting that protecting client identities was the foundation of their organization. Uncle Fu answered that rules only mattered when the Chu family chose to respect them. Then he ended the Grandmaster's life with one small movement and returned immediately to his harmless butler expression. He invited Chu Feng and Lingyan home because grandfather was waiting. The return to the estate revealed that the old prime minister already knew almost everything that had happened. Grandfather was raging in the meeting hall, furious that assassins had operated inside the capital and nearly killed his grandson twice. He redirected that anger toward Chu Feng's father for failing to uncover the threat sooner, despite commanding one of the strongest military networks in the dynasty. The god of war stood at attention and absorbed the criticism without defending himself. When her fire burned the bamboo cane, the blind elder lost both a weapon and confidence in the realm advantage he expected to control the fight. The Southern Bright Departure fire attacked more than surface material, making ordinary defensive techniques far less reliable around it. His decision to release full nether death energy showed he finally considered Lingyan a true lethal opponent rather than an angry younger cultivator. That escalation might have destroyed what remained of the restaurant and spread into the surrounding district. Uncle Fu's arrival stopped the fight before either Grandmaster-level pressure or Lingyan's fire could create wider casualties. The butler's control was more impressive than raw strength. He suppressed the entire room without dramatic aura, then concentrated power onto one target so precisely that Chu Feng and Lingyan remained untouched nearby. The blind elder recognized Great Grandmaster only after his body was already being crushed. That gap showed how far the Chu family's hidden servant stood above the experts, who had terrified the capital branch. Uncle Fu still asked for the client's identity before killing him, proving the family had not forgotten the original investigation inside all the retaliation. The elders' refusal preserved the mystery, but also confirmed the Nether Tower's contract system was compartmentalized at a high level. Even a local Grandmaster Guardian would die, rather than expose whoever paid for Chu Feng's death. That made finding the mastermind through ordinary captured assassins increasingly unlikely. At home, Grandfather's anger toward the god of war was partly about that intelligence failure. A military commander with hundreds of thousands of soldiers had allowed an assassin network to place multiple teams around his only son inside the capital. The punishment was not physical, because the father could correct the mistake more effectively by mobilizing his own networks. 3 days to identify the contractor was an almost impossible deadline, but the Chu household did not operate on normal expectations. Grandfather's switch from fury to affection showed why Chu Feng had grown attached to him so quickly despite the man's recklessness. Grandfather gave him 3 days to identify the client and destroy every Nether Tower base within 100 miles of the capital. His father accepted the order and left to mobilize the resources required. The instant the commander disappeared, Grandfather's expression softened toward Chu Feng again. He dismissed the Nether Tower as a sewer full of rats and returned to the subject he actually wanted to discuss. Was Chu Feng really entering the Qilong rankings? Chu Feng corrected his grandfather without hesitation. He was not entering merely to reach the top 10. He intended to take first place. Lingyan nearly choked on her tea. Even his father paused on the way out long enough to stare back in disbelief. First place represented the highest honor available to any young warrior in the dynasty, and this generation was considered unusually strong. Ancient families, royal factions, and hidden sects were all preparing prodigies who had trained seriously since childhood. Several favorites already approached Golden Core, while Chu Feng still showed only first-level Meridian opening cultivation. 3 days earlier, he had not been a cultivator at all. Chu Feng understood how absurd the claim sounded, but his private advantages made aiming lower feel like wasting them. The tower bent normal cultivation rules. The Divine Demon Supreme body turned realm gaps into survivable fights, and the Chaos Divine Demon art came from beyond this world's standards. If those gifts could not carry him toward the top, then he would have failed to use them properly. Grandfather listened until the end, then laughed with genuine satisfaction. He cared less about whether Chu Feng immediately succeeded than about finally hearing ambition from the grandson everyone had written off. He gave Chu Feng full support and promised that anyone trying to cheat him would answer to the entire household. Lingyan rolled her eyes at the predictable favoritism. Grandfather then explained why first place mattered, beyond the marriage challenge. The Qilong rankings were also a selection stage for a larger competition called the 100 Dynasties War. The Great Qin dynasty was only one of 100 kingdoms across the eastern domain. Every 30 years, the best young warriors from those nations gathered at East Emperor Mountain for access to the East Emperor's secret realm. Only the top 3 from the Qilong rankings would represent Great Qin. Chu Feng immediately recognized that the world he had entered extended far beyond the capital, and even beyond the dynasty itself. The tournament was not an ending. It was a doorway into a much larger cultivation stage. Back in his courtyard, Chu Feng checked Dali's progress before resuming his own training. The giant sat submerged in a massive medicinal barrel, while rare ingredients burned through his body and attacked the dormant bloodline from every direction. Pain twisted his face and raised thick veins across his skin, but Linger insisted the suffering meant the awakening process was working. Chu Feng could already sense frightening physical power gathering beneath the surface. Then Linger revealed another feature of the tower that made every previous advantage look almost modest. Time on the first floor did not move normally. A single moment in the outside world could contain roughly 100 days of cultivation inside the tower's chaos space. Chu Feng finally understood why the inheritance had been designed around a structure rather than a simple technique. While normal prodigies trained for months, he could compress entire seasons of practice into moments nobody else would notice. He entered the chaos space and began drilling the Chaos Divine Demon art without interruption. The technique contained brutal punches, finger strikes, body-refining methods, and attacks shaped by primordial divine and demonic power. At first, Chu Feng could barely control the movements. Days inside the tower turned clumsy imitation into familiarity. More days turned familiarity into smooth execution. Chaos energy continuously reinforced his muscles, bones, meridians, and recovery, while repetition carved each technique deeper into instinct. By the time 100 internal days passed, practically no real time had moved outside. The old prime minister never hid which side of a conflict mattered to him. His grandson came first, and politics became important only after that fact was secured. Chu Feng's claim that he wanted first place changed the emotional tone of the family meeting. Until then, everyone had been trying to protect or rescue him from consequences. For the first time, he was asking them to watch, while he pursued something difficult by his own strength. Grandfather's approval came from that change, more than the ranking itself. The Hundred Dynasties War also reframed the marriage challenge in Chu Feng's mind. Reaching the top 10 could win Yi Hongwan, but reaching the top 3 opened the door to an Eastern Domain stage, filled with stronger enemies and better resources. First place would prove he belonged in that larger world, rather than merely satisfying family pride. Dali's medicinal bath became part of the same preparation. Chu Feng did not want to enter the wider cultivation world alone, if he could build trusted strength around him now. Awakening Dali offered a companion whose physical talent could eventually scale with the threats beyond Great Qin. The giant's pain also demonstrated that rare constitutions were not free advantages. Bloodline Awakening demanded a body tough enough to survive violent transformation, just as Chu Feng's own divine body had required destruction before rebirth. Linger monitored the process while Chu Feng shifted his focus back to the tower. The 1 to 100 time difference was powerful, but it did not create infinite energy, food, concentration, or emotional endurance. Chu Feng could train for enormous internal periods only because chaos energy sustained the environment and the inheritance continuously refined his body. That made the first floor a true cultivation space rather than a simple clock trick. His repeated practice inside also protected him from a weakness created by rapid realm growth. Power obtained too quickly could leave technique far behind cultivation. 100 internal days gave Chu Feng enough repetition to make movements instinctive before the outside fit saw another breakthrough. That advantage changed the entire 1-month tournament challenge. Everyone else had 30 days. Chu Feng could create thousands of training days if his body, energy, and tower resources allowed it. While he trained, the rest of the dynasty began reacting to the chaos surrounding the Chu family. Deep beneath the capital, surviving leaders of the Nether Tower held an emergency meeting over the destruction of their local branch. 4 guardians and 9 elders gathered around an empty bone throne while the head elder delivered the losses. The capital base had been wiped out. The blind grandmaster protecting it had been killed. The attackers were identified as Chu Lingyan and an elderly butler from the Marquis household. Learning that a household servant could kill a grandmaster in one move silenced even the most aggressive elders. One faction argued that a failed contract worth only a few million silver was not worth losing more top experts. The Blood Slaughter Guardian rejected retreat because the organization had built centuries of reputation on completing paid killings. The Snake Guardian agreed that abandoning Chu Feng after accepting payment could damage future business across the dynasty. The head elder looked toward the empty throne and proposed waking the Tower Master from seclusion. That suggestion frightened people who had spent their lives killing without hesitation. Their hidden leader had remained secluded for years, and even his own senior assassins disliked the idea of disturbing him. The head elder considered that fear useful. If the dynasty had forgotten who ruled the shadows, then one devastating assassination could restore the Nether Tower's reputation. Chu Feng had accidentally become important enough to wake an enemy far beyond the people he had already fought. 3 days passed in the outside world, while his name spread through the capital for an entirely different reason. News that the famous playboy planned to enter the Chilong rankings became public entertainment. Tea houses began taking informal bets on how quickly he would lose. Some predicted broken legs in the first round. Others doubted he could survive 3 exchanges against a serious competitor. Nobody connected the mocked heir with the masked genius who had killed an innate realm expert at the Misty Rain Pavilion. At the third prince's residence, the repeated failures produced another violent outburst. The prince had planned Chu Feng's original death carefully and now watched every result move him farther from Yi Hongwan instead. He blamed the Nether Tower, destroyed more expensive objects, and rejected reassurance from frightened servants. His obsession with Yi Hongwan had become more important than the political logic that started the conspiracy. The prince ordered his people to contact his maternal grandfather and find another way to remove Chu Feng permanently. At the second prince's mansion, the response was colder and more strategic. Second Prince Xiao Yu played chess with the right prime minister, Bing Zhao, grandfather Chu's political rival and Bai Bufan's grandfather. They viewed the proposed Chu-Yi marriage as a threat to the balance of power. Combining the Chu household's government influence and cavalry with Yi Hongwan's military prestige could create a faction the throne itself would fear. The right prime minister suggested turning the Chilong rankings into a weapon. Rather than assassinating Chu Feng directly, they would spread rumors that his family planned to manufacture a fake genius with pills and money. Proud young prodigies would then target him voluntarily to prove their own legitimacy. If Chu Feng died on the tournament platform, the death could be blamed on ordinary combat instead of court conspiracy. The same men also discussed recruiting the mysterious masked genius from the arena before another faction could secure him. Neither realized they were trying to recruit Chu Feng as a weapon against Chu Feng. They also noted that Yang Tianba, a leading heir of the Yang family, had reached the 9th level of the innate realm. That name mattered because his younger relative had already been publicly humiliated by the masked Chu Feng. The 5th prince had his own revenge plan. After being forced to pay 10 million silver, Xiaoxian wanted Chu Feng humiliated publicly rather than killed quietly. He sent an assassin known as Viper and ordered that the playboy suffer in front of the capital. The 3rd prince, meanwhile, escalated again. After learning the engagement challenge had not frightened Chu Feng away, every failed attempt only pushed him towards stronger relatives, deeper conspiracies, and more reckless decisions. Even the emperor began paying attention. Late at night, Imperial intelligence reports summarized the Chu family's hidden strength one alarming name at a time. The prime minister controlled enormous influence at court. The god of war commanded 300,000 cavalry. Chu Lingyan had reached void-piercing at an absurdly young age. A supposedly ordinary butler now appeared capable of killing grandmasters. And the useless grandson had suddenly stopped behaving like a useless grandson. The emperor understood why other factions feared a marriage between that household and Yi Hongwan's military family. He did not accuse the Chus of rebellion, but he no longer considered loyalty enough. He ordered the Imperial Secret Service to watch Chu Feng closely. Every movement, meeting, meal, and conversation was to be recorded until the court understood whether the boy was truly incompetent or had been hiding ability. If Chu Feng turned out to be a concealed threat rather than a harmless fool, the emperor's instruction was simple. He was to be killed without mercy. Chu Feng knew none of these orders while training inside the tower. When he emerged after another compressed session, one breath from his lungs left a visible streak through the room. He checked his cultivation and found 5 open meridians. Only 3 outside days had passed, yet he had reached the 5th level of meridian opening. For any normal cultivator, that speed would have sounded fictional. Chu Feng still considered it slower than he wanted, because Schwanger's profound yin body was no longer producing the same explosive gains. The tower had consumed the easiest benefits first. Further acceleration would require a stronger constitution, a more powerful bloodline, better resources, or all 3. Linger immediately reminded him that the household contained several premium possibilities. Qingyao carried the Qingluan bloodline. Lingyan possessed a top-tier fire constitution. Yi Hongwan almost certainly carried something extraordinary, given her impossible military talent. Chu Feng refused to let the system turn every relationship into a calculation, but he could not ignore how directly those constitutions affected survival. The political reaction outside the Chu estate became dangerous because each faction interpreted the same events through different fears. The Nether Tower cared about reputation and the cost of looking weak after failing a paid contract. The 3rd prince cared about Yi Hongwan and the collapse of a conspiracy built around controlling her future. The right prime minister cared about preventing the Chu and Yi families from combining military and political influence. The 5th prince cared about personal humiliation after being forced to pay 10 million silver in his own establishment. The emperor cared about all of them because a family powerful enough to frighten princes could eventually frighten the throne. Those motives were separate, which made the pressure harder to predict. Chu Feng was not facing one mastermind controlling every enemy. He had entered a capital where several ambitious people could attack the same target for entirely different reasons. That distinction mattered because defeating one conspiracy would not automatically remove the others. The Nether Tower leadership's decision to wake its master was especially dangerous because the organization no longer viewed Chu Feng as an ordinary contract. His survival had become a test of whether the assassins could still enforce their name against one of the dynasty's strongest households. The 3rd prince's escalation toward his maternal grandfather showed similar loss of control. Each failure made him more willing to expose higher-level connections that had previously stayed hidden. At the 2nd prince's garden, the chessboard conversation revealed a smarter threat than direct assassination. The right prime minister understood that young prodigies could be manipulated through pride without ever learning they were serving court politics. Calling Chu Feng a fraud would make every victory look suspicious and every loss look deserved. If he used family treasures, critics could claim he had bought cultivation. If he revealed unusual strength, rivals could accuse the Chu household of hiding a dangerous weapon. Either outcome could isolate him before the tournament even began. The emperor's surveillance order turned that social pressure into something more serious. Chu Feng's old useless reputation had accidentally protected him from imperial suspicion for years. Improving too quickly risked proving that the persons the throne ignored was capable of becoming a future power center. That meant Chu Feng needed strength fast enough to survive enemies, but secrecy strong enough to avoid triggering the emperor before he was ready. His masked identity had solved part of that problem temporarily. The auction would soon make maintaining that separation far harder. When Chu Feng reached 5th level meridian opening, he did not celebrate because the tower had changed his sense of time. 3 outside days represented hundreds of internal training days, so every visible breakthrough already carried enormous effort from his perspective. The challenge was no longer whether he could become stronger. It was whether his external realm could rise fast enough without exposing the impossible mechanism behind it. Schwanger's diminishing effect also forced him to confront the system's scaling problem earlier than expected. A constitution powerful enough to unlock the first floor was not automatically powerful enough to fuel every later stage forever. The tower demanded progressively better sources as Chu Feng's own foundation improved. That created a natural ceiling on using the same method repeatedly without seeking new opportunities. Linger's excitement around Qingyao, Lingyan, and Yi Hongwan came from that reality rather than simple obsession. Each woman represented a different bloodline or constitution potentially strong enough to sustain higher-level tower functions. Chu Feng still had to navigate trust, consent, family relationships, and political consequences before any of that potential became usable. The Misty Rain Pavilion auction therefore offered a cleaner path to power through resources he could simply purchase. Dragon blood materials, ancient maps, and rare pills did not require explaining the tower to anyone. They could strengthen allies, open future opportunities, and improve his position without revealing the coarse cheat behind his growth. That made the auction strategically important even before the first valuable item appeared. Qingyao interrupted the internal debate with a practical reminder. The Misty Rain Pavilion's grand auction began that night. Chu Feng stepped outside and found Lingyan already waiting to tease him about disappearing into his room for days. Her joking stopped the moment she sensed his new realm. She grabbed his wrist and checked twice before accepting that he had gone from 1st to 5th level meridian opening in 3 days. Even a void-piercing prodigy could not explain that pace through normal cultivation. Chu Feng's responded with another deliberately useless answer and called it basic progress. Lingyan almost strangled him for pretending the achievement was ordinary. She decided to attend the auction and buy whatever equipment might keep her younger brother alive during the tournament. Chu Feng was already going, so he asked Qingyao to prepare another mask for Lingyan. Then he finally told his sister that the capital's famous masked arena genius was also him. Lingyan stared, connected the rumors, and burst into uncontrollable laughter. Powerful factions were offering fortunes to recruit a mysterious prodigy while insulting the same person openly under his real name. She considered the situation too funny to ruin and agreed that the mask should remain. That night, the Misty Rain Pavilion glowed over the capital while rare beast-drawn carriages lined the street outside. Nobles, sect members, merchants, and ancient families arrived surrounded by guards and expensive displays of status. Chu Feng, Lingyan, and Qingyao approached in masks with none of that ceremony. Before they reached the entrance, guards began clearing a path for a carriage pulled by 4 white dragon horses. The vehicle belonged to the Shen family, another of the dynasty's 5 ancient great houses. Shen Lang stepped out first, followed by his colder and more composed sister Shenjing Shui. The crowd bowed and moved aside immediately. Chu Feng's group did not. Shen Lang interpreted the unmoving masked strangers as peasants too ignorant to recognize his family and ordered them out of the road. Lingyan's killing intent began rising beside Chu Feng. He spoke before she turned the entrance into a disaster. Chu Feng calmly asked why the Shen family expected strangers to treat a public pavilion entrance like private property. The answer enraged Shen Lang enough to order guards to remove the masks and break his legs. Shen Jingshui stopped her brother's guards. Something about Chu Feng's posture, lack of fear, and concealed aura made her suspect the situation was not as simple as her brother believed. Before she could investigate further, a pavilion hostess rushed outside. She ignored the Shen siblings and walked directly to Chu Feng. The woman bowed deeply and announced that the pavilion master had prepared the finest private box for his arrival. The crowd's attitude changed instantly. Someone the Misty Rain Pavilion treated above an ancient family could not be an ordinary masked traveler. Shen Lang's humiliation became worse when a spectator recognized the bronze mask and purple-gold invitation. The man had attended the Beast Arena 3 nights earlier. He identified Chu Feng as the mysterious Meridian opening fighter who killed an innate realm master in public. Fear replaced mockery throughout the entrance crowd. Shen Lang had just ordered the legs broken of someone famous for punching through stronger cultivators. Chu Feng did not bother threatening him after that. He simply walked inside while the Shen heir tried to preserve what remained of his pride. The pavilion escorted the group to a 7th-floor private box called Celestial Pivot. The Shen family's arrival outside the pavilion also gave Chu Feng a preview of how the ancient houses treated public space. Their guards expected crowds to move because generations of status had taught everyone that resisting created more trouble than obedience. Chu Feng's refusal was small, but it challenged that assumption in front of dozens of witnesses. Shen Jingshu stopped her brother because she understood that people who ignored obvious status usually had either extraordinary backing or no survival instinct. The pavilion hostess immediately confirmed which category Chu Feng belonged to. Her deference was not casual customer service. A purple gold invitation marked someone the pavilion master considered personally important enough to separate from ordinary nobles. When the spectator identified Chu Feng's bronze mask, the social order outside the entrance reversed in seconds. The same people who mocked anonymous strangers now tried to remember whether they had said anything dangerous within hearing range. Shen Lang could not take back his order, which made walking away without another insult more humiliating than any slap. Inside Celestial Pivot, the one-way crystal gave Chu Feng a useful advantage. He could study major competitors and factions without immediately revealing which reactions interested him. Yang Tianfa's 9th-level innate aura confirmed that the tournament favorites were not exaggerated stories. A body cultivator that close to Golden Core would be a serious opponent even with Chu Feng's unusual durability. The black-cloaked stranger was harder to evaluate because his concealment seemed designed to make attention slip before people consciously noticed him. Only the Divine Demon Supreme Body's warning response kept Chu Feng from forgetting the presence entirely. Lu Ruyan created a different kind of uncertainty. Linger could sense dormant power inside her, but not enough information existed to explain whether she was ally, threat, or something else entirely. Chu Feng therefore avoided making assumptions based only on beauty and mystery. The Dragon Blood Sacred Grass became the first auction item tied directly to a concrete plan. Dali's Awakening Bath already contained rare materials, but true dragon essence could raise the quality of the entire process. Instead of helping Chu Feng personally, the treasure would multiply the strength of someone he had deliberately chosen to recruit. That made the enormous price easier to justify strategically. Yang Tianba wanted the same plant for himself, creating a direct conflict between two different body cultivation paths. One-way crystal windows overlooked the entire auction hall, while keeping the occupants hidden from ordinary guests. Lingyan removed her mask, dropped onto a luxurious sofa, and began eating spirit fruit while teasing Chu Feng about becoming the capital's newest celebrity. Chu Feng scanned the hall instead. He sensed numerous innate realm auras below, enough to make the auction feel like a gathering of every dangerous faction in the region. The Yang family soon arrived, led by Yang Tianba. He was larger, calmer, and far more powerful than the younger young noble Chu Feng had humiliated at the arena. 9th-level innate realm energy surrounded him, confirming why many considered him a top-5 Chilong contender. Lingyan dismissed him as a brute, but Chu Feng filed the strength away seriously. Another presence worried him more. A black-cloaked figure slipped into a dark corner so quietly that almost nobody reacted. Chu Feng's Divine Demon Supreme Body sensed danger from the stranger, even though ordinary awareness seemed to slide past him. He marked the person mentally as someone worth watching. Then the auction officially began. A stunning woman in a purple dress stepped onto the central stage and introduced herself as Lu Ruyan. Her voice and appearance captured the room immediately, but Chu Feng felt something stranger than simple attraction. For one brief moment, the name seemed to connect with knowledge from his previous life, though the memory remained unclear. Linger interrupted before he could chase it. She sensed a terrifying dormant power hidden inside Lu Ruyan. Once again, an apparently ordinary beautiful woman near Chu Feng turned out to contain a constitution or mystery far beyond the surface. Lingyan caught him staring, and immediately accused him of focusing more on the auctioneer than the auction. Chu Feng denied it with a straight face that convinced nobody. The first several lots included rare weapons, pills, and techniques that ordinary guests fought over aggressively. Chu Feng's remained uninterested because the tower's inheritance had raised his standards beyond most local treasures. The 10th item changed that. Lu Ruyan revealed a blood-red plant shaped like dragon whiskers and radiating powerful vitality across the entire hall. It was Dragon Blood Sacred Grass, grown from soil once soaked in the blood of a true dragon. For body cultivators, the plant could strengthen foundations and even help peak meridian opening fighters challenge the innate barrier. Yang Tianba reacted immediately because his combat path relied heavily on physical cultivation. His advisors believed the treasure might push him toward golden core before the tournament. Linger gave Chu Feng a different reason to care. The dragon blood essence could merge with Dali's awakening bath and greatly strengthen the innate divine strength constitution. That made the grass more valuable to Chu Feng than any ordinary breakthrough pill. The opening price was 3 million silver taels. Yang Tianba jumped directly to 5 million, attempting to scare away weaker bidders with one aggressive move. Chu Feng answered from the private box with 6 million. The hall turned toward the hidden bidder immediately. Yang Tianba raised to 8. Chu Feng moved to 10 without changing tone. Then Yang Tianba doubled the pressure and called 20 million. Chu Feng finally encountered a problem stronger than cultivation, his bank balance. The fifth prince had paid him 10 million, which suddenly looked small compared with an ancient family's accumulated wealth. Link noticed the silence and asked whether her little brother wanted the grass badly enough to keep bidding. Chu Feng admitted that he did. He also admitted that he needed money. Lingyan looked almost offended by the idea that her brother would formally borrow from her. She told him what belonged to his sister belonged to him as well. Then she raised the bid to 30 million. Yang Tianba demanded to know who was intentionally challenging the Yang family. Lingyan laughed from behind the barrier and told him to stop barking if he could not afford to continue. Her next bid was 50 million. The hall erupted because the plant was worth far less than that under ordinary market conditions. Yang Tianba understood that continuing would turn the auction into a public contest of pride instead of a rational purchase. He withdrew, furious but unwilling to let the price climb endlessly. The dragon blood sacred grass went to Chu Feng's box. His aggressive first bid tried to use reputation as part of the currency. Most guests understood that outbidding an ancient family heir could create problems long after the auction ended. Chu Feng's private box removed some of that intimidation because Yang Tianba could not initially see who was challenging him. Lingyan's money removed the rest. Her decision to jump far above market value was partly protective. Once the price became irrational, ordinary bidders stopped participating, and the auction turned into a contest the Chu household could afford better than most individuals. The humiliation was a side effect she clearly enjoyed. Winning the grass also forced Yang Tianba to reveal how emotionally important body cultivation resources were to him. That information could matter later if Chu Feng faced him in the Qilong rankings. The Spirit King fragment carried a completely different kind of value. Nobody could use 1/4 of the map immediately, which meant bidders were paying for future leverage and the possibility of completing the set later. Linger's ability transformed that uncertain value into something concrete. Once the tower memorized the signature, Chu Feng no longer needed luck to recognize another fragment. The ancient energy that entered him on contact also confirmed the map was more than decorative hide covered in symbols. The chaos divine demon art consuming that energy showed another useful property of the inheritance. Foreign power that might harm ordinary cultivators could sometimes become fuel instead of poison if the technique could refine it safely. Deadwood's public threat after losing the bid exposed the weakness of auction house protection. The Misty Rain Pavilion could prevent violence inside its walls, but it could not stop powerful buyers from waiting outside. That was exactly why ancient treasures often created more danger for the winner than the loser. Lingyan trusted Uncle Fu enough to laugh at the threat. Yet Chu Feng still remembered that Deadwood belonged to a world beyond Great Qin. A Grand Master from a foreign criminal organization could have allies, information networks, and reasons to avoid attacking the Chu estate directly. The marrow cleansing pill shifted the room from greed into desperation because it could rewrite a person's entire martial future. For weak heirs, the pill meant family survival. For talented disciples, it meant removing bottlenecks before rivals caught up. For princes, it meant creating another elite subordinate or strengthening their own foundation. He accepted the treasure, knowing Dali's awakening had just received another major advantage. Lingyan treated the 50 million expense like a minor household purchase. The next item was a torn piece of ancient beast hide covered in symbols and radiating energy that felt older than the dynasty itself. Lu Ruyan identified it as one fragment of a treasure map left by the Spirit King 1,000 years earlier. The name changed the mood among older cultivators immediately. Lingyan explained that the Spirit King once ruled the entire eastern domain before it fractured into 100 separate kingdoms. He had reached the legendary King realm, a level so distant that Great Qin's strongest experts could barely use it as a reference point. Linger confirmed the hide was genuine because its seal carried power only a King realm cultivator could have left. She also reminded Chu Feng how many major realms still separated his current meridian opening cultivation from anything called King Realm. The map supposedly pointed toward the Spirit Palace, a secret realm where the Spirit King sealed his inheritance before death. According to old records, the key had been divided across 4 map fragments. Owning one piece alone did not reveal the complete location. For Chu Feng, however, the fragment had another purpose. Linger could memorize its unique energy signature and sense the other pieces if they entered a large enough range. Buying one fragment would effectively turn the tower into a detector for the remaining 3. Chu Feng gave Lingyan one look. She understood immediately and raised the bidding to 50 million before the major families finished warming up. Yang Tianba's anger returned at once. He threatened that treasures required strength to protect, making his intention to rob the winner obvious to everyone. Lingyan answered by asking whether he was broke again. The Yang family pushed the price to 60 million. Lingyan responded with 100 million. The entire hall erupted because that number rivaled enormous portions of national revenue. Yang Tianba abandoned the bidding and ordered subordinates to identify the people inside Chu Feng's box. Lu Ruyan prepared to close the sale. Then an emotionless voice from the darkest corner offered 110 million. Chu Feng immediately recognized the bidder as the cloaked stranger who had triggered his danger sense earlier. The real contest for the Spirit King's map had just changed opponents. Lingyan rose from the sofa the moment she sensed the new bidder clearly. The shabby middle-aged man looked like an exhausted farmer, complete with worn clothes, muddy shoes, and a pipe hanging from one hand. His appearance did not match the amount of money he had just offered. More importantly, Lingyan identified him as a grandmaster, whose cultivation exceeded the blind Nether Tower elder she had fought. Chu Feng gone years without seeing a single expert at that level, and somehow encountered several within days of transmigrating. The farmer did not bother hiding his hostility after Lingyan continued bidding. Visible pressure struck the private box barrier, carrying enough killing intent to make nearby guests recoil. Lingyan destroyed it with her own aura and told him to raise his price or stay quiet. The man answered with 200 million silver taels. Lingyan immediately called 210 million. For the first time, the farmer's casual expression cracked. He stared at their box, then publicly identified them as members of the Marquis household, despite their attempt to remain anonymous. Finally, he withdrew with a quiet threat. He would allow the Chu family to hold the fragment temporarily and come collect it himself later. Chu Feng asked whether the man had just announced plans to rob their estate. Lingjin dismissed the concern by reminding him what Uncle Fu had done to the last Grand Master, who entered their family's business uninvited. The map fragment arrived in the private box moments later. The instant Chu Feng touched it, ancient energy rushed through his arm and tried to flood his mind. The sensation was cold, chaotic, and violent enough that a normal cultivator might have suffered serious spiritual damage. The Chaos Divine Demon Art activated on instinct and absorbed the foreign energy instead of letting it overwhelm him. Linger completed the more important task at the same time. She memorized the fragment's signature and confirmed that the tower could now detect the other pieces from an enormous distance. The purchase had effectively turned an incomplete map into a future treasure hunting radar. Below, the auction hall erupted with speculation after the mysterious bidder exposed the Chu family's identity. Yang Tianba immediately began discussing how to take the dragon blood sacred grass once the siblings left the pavilion's protected territory. His advisors also noted that the Spirit King fragment would make the Chu party a target for every ambitious faction present. Before those schemes developed further, Lu Ruyan announced that the auction's true final item was still coming. A servant carried a jade box to the stage. When the lid opened, fragrance spread through the hall and stirred the internal energy of nearly every cultivator present. Inside floated a perfectly round pill surrounded by 7-colored light. Someone recognized it and shouted the name before Lu Ruyan finished the reveal. It was a marrow-cleansing pill. The treasure could transform weak talent, refine an existing foundation, and give ordinary cultivators a chance to become genuine geniuses. Lingyan reacted more strongly than Chu Feng expected. She explained that grandfather and their father had searched for years, hoping to find such a pill for the old Chu Feng. The family had never abandoned the useless heir completely. They had spent enormous effort looking for a way to repair the talent he wasted. Chu Feng absorbed that realization quietly. The people around this body had cared far more than the original owner had deserved. Lu Ruan then announced that silver would not be accepted for the pill. The bidding required low-grade spirit stones, a resource primarily used by higher-level cultivators and far rarer than ordinary wealth. Most guests stopped participating immediately. The fifth prince opened at 20 spirit stones. Shen Jingshuo raised the bid. Yang Tianba joined as well, though his interest remained lower than it had been for the Dragonblood treasure. The price quickly climbed beyond 40 stones. Chu Feng asked Linger whether the pill could meaningfully improve his own foundation. Her answer was almost dismissive. The Divine Demon's supreme body and Chaos Divine Demon art had already reforged him beyond what the pill was designed to accomplish. Using it on Chu Feng would waste a treasure other people would kill to obtain. He relaxed and watched the wealthy factions fight instead. Then a previously silent private box entered the auction at 50 stones. The speaker represented the Heavenly Sword sect, one of the dynasty's 3 strongest martial sects. Its top disciple, Lin Yi, was a half-step golden core prodigy and one of the favorites for the Chilong rankings. The sect's reputation silenced several royal and noble bidders immediately. Lin Yi assumed the pill was his until the black-cloaked stranger in the lower hall offered 51 stones. The Heavenly Sword disciple released sword and demanded to know who dared oppose his sect. The cloaked bidder ignored him and increased the price again. Lin Yi sent killing pressure across the room. It disappeared several feet from the stranger as though swallowed by empty space. That response forced the young swordsman to recognize a dangerous realm difference and sit back down. The black-cloaked cultivator reached 60 spirit stones without revealing anything about his identity. That was why the switch from silver to spirit stones eliminated most of the audience instantly. Ordinary wealth could be accumulated through taxes, land, or trade. Spirit stones belonged to a higher cultivation economy and therefore exposed which factions possessed deeper foundations. The Heavenly Sword sect entering the bid demonstrated that distinction clearly. Its top disciple did not need royal permission to threaten competitors, because the sect's military strength existed outside court authority. The black-cloaked bidder silenced him without revealing a name, proving there were still hidden experts in the room above the tournament generation. Yi Hongwan's entrance then changed Chu Feng's focus from observation to personal stakes. She did not arrive surrounded by servants demanding attention. Her battlefield reputation created space without anyone needing to announce who she was. The cold around her was partly cultivation and partly the killing intent of someone who had spent years making life or death decisions. Chu Feng noticed the difference between the woman and the stories about her. The rumors emphasized bodies and blood. Her attempt to buy the pill for Yi Hao revealed responsibility, worry, and the fear that her family might decline when the older generation disappeared. That concern made her request for courtesy far more meaningful. A commander famous for refusing weakness publicly admitted she had reached the limit of what she could pay. The foreign noble exploited that exact vulnerability. His proposition was not merely crude. It tried to turn Yi Hongwan's concern for her brother into leverage over her body in front of every major faction attending the auction. That public humiliation was why Chu Feng finally abandoned the safety of anonymity. Calling her his woman risked angering Yi Hongwan, exposing his mask, and drawing more attention from the capital. He accepted all 3 costs because staying silent would contradict the relationship he had already chosen to pursue. Lingyan reacted even faster because the same foreign noble had already disrespected her during the Nether Tower raid. Her grip on his throat was personal, protective, and dangerously close to creating a war she did not care about starting. The revelation about Grand Chancellor Yan forced everyone else in the room to think beyond personal strength. Great Li could use the death of its chancellor's only son as justification for military retaliation, regardless of who actually started the conflict. Yi Hongwan's request to stop came from knowing exactly what that retaliation would look like on civilians and border armies. Chu Feng's solution preserved deterrence without giving the foreign empire a corpse. The extortion forced the young noble to lose money, face, and the pill while still leaving the pavilion alive. It also turned the political threat attached to his father into a direct cost instead of a shield from consequences. Buying the marrow cleansing pill with those same stones completed the humiliation in front of everyone who had watched the exchange. Giving the pill to Yi Hongwan changed the scene again because Chu Feng surrendered the treasure the moment it became his. Lu Ruyan was about to close the auction when a colder voice came from the entrance. The new bid was 80 spirit stones. Every conversation stopped as Yi Hongwan walked into the pavilion. Her black hair was tied for battle. Her face held its usual frozen calm, and years of killing intent followed her into the hall without effort. This was the first time Chu Feng had seen his future bride clearly in person. The inherited memories had not exaggerated her beauty, but they had also failed to capture how dangerous she felt simply standing still. Lingyan nudged her younger brother and quietly approved of grandfather's taste in potential granddaughters-in-law. Chu Feng was more interested in why Yi Hongwan wanted a marrow cleansing pill when her own cultivation talent was already extraordinary. The answer became obvious almost immediately. She was buying it for Yi Hao. The Yi household's male heir lacked the ability required to carry the family forward, and the clan's older generation was slowly aging out of power. Yi Hongwan was willing to spend resources from her own master to repair her brother's future. The choice revealed a side of the feared commander that battlefield stories never mentioned. She was merciless to enemies, but she cared deeply about her family. At 80 spirit stones, the cloaked bitter and heavenly sword sect withdrew. Yi Hongwan appeared ready to win. Then a familiar, arrogant voice offered 100. Chu Feng recognized the speaker as the foreign young noble Lingyan had slapped through restaurant tables during the Nether Tower raid. The man had recovered physically and apparently learned nothing emotionally. He sat in the ordinary section despite carrying a fortune in spirit stones and protection far beyond his apparent status. Yi Hongwan's expression tightened because 80 stones had been her limit. She did something few people in the room expected from the dynasty's feared general. She asked the bitter for courtesy. If he allowed the Yi household to take the pill, she promised him one personal favor in return. A favor from Yi Hongwan could influence armies, military campaigns, and even negotiations between great families. Any rational political player would have considered the offer seriously. The foreign noble was interested in something else. He looked over Yi Hongwan openly and offered to surrender the pill if she spent several nights as his woman. Silence swallowed the entire auction pavilion. Everyone present understood that he had just humiliated the most dangerous young female commander in the dynasty in public. Yi Hongwan's killing intent exploded. The air turned bitterly cold and weaker cultivators collapsed under pressure that felt like a battlefield full of corpses. The foreign youth finally showed fear. His elderly bodyguard stepped forward and released enough cultivation to block Yi Hongwan's aura from reaching his master. Protected again, the young noble recovered his arrogance and continued speaking, as though he had offered her something generous. Chu Feng finally stopped watching from above. Whatever political relationship existed between them, Yi Hongwan was still the woman his grandfather intended him to marry, and the person he had chosen to pursue. He would not sit quietly while someone treated her like merchandise. His voice cut through the hall from the 7th floor box. Chu Feng asked the foreign noble whether he understood what happened to people who set filthy eyes on his woman. Hundreds of heads turned upward. Chu Feng opened the private box, stepped to the railing, and removed his mask. The revelation hit the hall harder than any auction bid. The mysterious meridian opening prodigy who killed an innate expert was Chu Feng, the capital's most mocked playboy. Guests, who had laughed about his tournament challenge, suddenly had to reconcile two completely different reputations belonging to the same person. Yi Hongwan looked up with visible surprise for the first time since entering the hall. The man she considered a hopeless wastrel was standing in the pavilion's highest private box after spending fortunes under a hidden identity. The foreign noble recognized him as well. Before he could react, Lingyan appeared beside Chu Feng and remembered exactly who the man was. She remarked that the slap from their previous meeting had clearly been too gentle. Then she disappeared from the balcony. One moment Lingyan stood beside Chu Feng. The next, her hand was around the foreign noble's throat, lifting him into the air before most spectators even tracked the movement. His elderly protector attacked with full force. Lingyan blocked the strike one-handed, without releasing the young master, and forced the older expert backward across the floor. The imbalance made the situation clear. Whoever the bodyguard was, he could not defeat Chu Lingyan. The foreign youth kicked helplessly and demanded recognition of his identity. Lingyan answered that anyone who threatened her little brother could be killed regardless of family background. The bodyguard finally revealed the card he had been saving. His young master was the only son of Grand Chancellor Yan from the Great Li dynasty. The foreign empire was vastly stronger than Great Qin, and Chancellor Yan held enough power to influence or even frighten his own emperor. Killing the man's only son could provide a pretext for invasion and cost millions of ordinary people their lives. Yi Hongwan immediately told Lingyan to stop, because she understood the military consequences better than anyone in the room. Lingyan still looked perfectly willing to test whether an entire empire could survive making her angry. Chu Feng intervened before pride created a national disaster. He asked his sister to release the foreign noble. Lingyan pouted, then dropped the young man to the floor rather than killing him. The room assumed Chu Feng had chosen political restraint. He had, but not for free. Chu Feng crouched beside the gasping noble and announced that trying to claim his woman normally deserved death. Since the man's father was important, Chu Feng was willing to commute the sentence for 100 spirit stones. The entire hall needed a moment to understand that he was extorting the son of a foreign grand chancellor in public. The young noble called the demand insane. His bodyguard condemned the insult and threatened consequences. Chu Feng stood, looked directly at the older man, and answered without backing away. Yes, he was bullying them. The question was what they intended to do about it. With Lingyan standing 3 steps behind him, he gave them 3 breaths: pay 100 spirit stones and leave Great Qin, or stay and die in the pavilion. The bodyguard's anger turned into calculation. Chu Feng's visible realm was low, but his mysterious arena feat remained unexplained, and Lingyan had already overpowered the older man casually. Before the count finished, the protector threw over a storage bag containing the demanded spirit stones. Chu Feng checked the amount and told them to get out. The foreign noble left, supported by his bodyguard, carrying humiliation instead of the marrow-cleansing pill he had tried to buy. Chu Feng immediately tossed all 100 spirit stones toward Lu Ruyan on the stage. He bought the pill with the money he had just extorted. The audience assumed the famous wastrel had finally acquired the treasure his family once searched the kingdom to find. Instead of storing it, Chu Feng walked straight toward Yi Hongwan. The female general watched him approach with a wariness no enemy army had managed to produce. Chu Feng stopped in front of her and held out the jade box. He reminded Yi Hongwan that the Chilong rankings were 1 month away and repeated his promise to reach the top 10. Then he told her to take the pill for Yi Hao as an early wedding gift. For a fraction of a moment, Yi Hongwan's cold expression completely failed. She had expected arrogance, cowardice, or shameless flirting from Chu Feng. She had not expected him to spend 100 spirit stones solving the problem she could not solve herself. Yi Hongwan asked what he meant by the gesture. Chu Feng told her simply that his woman should not have to beg disgusting people for what she needed. The answer irritated her, embarrassed her, and affected her far more than she wanted the hall to see. Then another thought reached her. As far as Yi Hongwan knew, Chu Feng was still an untalented young man preparing for an impossible tournament. The marrow-cleansing pill might have been his only realistic chance to improve fast enough. She accused him of throwing away the one treasure that could have helped him reach the rankings. Chu Feng shrugged and told her the pill was useless to him. From her perspective, the statement sounded like suicidal arrogance. Yi Hongwan still kept the pill. She pulled out a storage bag containing 80 spirit stones and threw it back to him. The remaining 20, she said, would be a debt until he proved himself. As for any wedding gift, he needed to reach the top 10 before they discussed that relationship seriously. Then she walked away carrying the pill for her brother. Chu Feng watched her leave and realized the transaction had worked out strangely well. He entered the auction with no spirit stones, extorted 100, spent 100 on the pill, gifted it away, and received 80 back. He also changed Yi Hongwan's opinion of him for the first time without begging for approval. Lingyan joined him and offered to solve the bride's stubbornness through kidnapping if diplomacy failed. Chu Feng told his sister he would handle his own future wife. Elsewhere in the pavilion, Shen Lang was furious that Chu Feng could casually give away a treasure his own family wanted desperately. Shen Jingshou shut down his complaints by pointing out that winning the item would only have attracted enemies they were not prepared to fight that night. The fifth prince watched everything with a colder expression and quietly ordered his people to gather more force. After the auction ended, Lu Ruyan invited Chu Feng's group backstage to settle the enormous silver purchases. The Dragon Blood, Sacred Grass, and Spirit King fragment together represented hundreds of millions of silver taels. Lu Ruyan also offered intelligence that mattered more than the payment. The farmer-like grandmaster who challenged them for the map was not from Great Qin. His code name was Deadwood, and he belonged to the Blood Fiend Hall of the Nether Sea. The Nether Sea was a lawless territory vastly larger than the dynasty, filled with organizations whose reach extended across multiple kingdoms. Lingyan's reaction showed that the Blood Fiend Hall was dangerous even by her standards. Chu Feng added another powerful faction to the growing list of people who might eventually appear at his door. Then Lu Ruyan confirmed something else. She had already identified Chu Feng as the masked arena prodigy before he revealed himself publicly. Every major faction had been asking the Misty Rain Pavilion for that identity. She promised that the pavilion would not volunteer information beyond what Chu Feng himself had exposed. He appreciated the discretion, though the secret was now far less secure after removing his mask in front of half the capital's elite. Chu Feng left the pavilion with 80 spirit stones, the Dragon Blood Sacred Grass, and the Spirit King's map fragment. He was not trying to impress the crowd with wealth alone. He solved the specific family problem that had forced Yi Hongwan to lower her pride and ask a stranger for help. That was why her reaction carried more weight than ordinary surprise. For the first time, Chu Feng behaved like someone who noticed what she was protecting, rather than only what she looked like or how feared she was. Her return of 80 spirit stones preserved her own pride and prevented the gift from becoming an uncontrolled debt. Keeping the pill, however, showed that Yi Hao's future mattered enough for her to accept help from a man she still doubted. The remaining 20-stone debt created a small, concrete connection between them before the tournament settled the larger marriage question. Lu Ruyan's later intelligence about Deadwood confirmed that the auction had pulled Chu Feng into conflicts beyond domestic noble politics. The Blood Fiend Hall of the Nether Sea operated on a scale that made the five ancient families look local by comparison. That made the Spirit King fragment both more valuable and more dangerous than it had appeared on stage. The walk outside tested that danger immediately, although the first attackers were local rather than foreign. Young Tianba had waited beyond the pavilion's protected zone instead of risking punishment inside. His demand for both major treasures proved he had been planning the robbery since losing the bids. The presence of high-level family elites showed the ambush was organized rather than a spontaneous outburst from one angry heir. Several attackers reaching Golden Core also meant this was not an opponent Chu Feng could dismiss, simply because he had survived lower innate experts. Lingyan and Qingyao were still beside him, but the balance of force was finally becoming serious enough that every decision mattered. He had also gained useful intelligence, improved his standing with Yi Hongwan, and made several new enemies in one evening. The successful night lasted approximately 50 feet beyond the front door. A wall of Yang family fighters blocked the street. Yang Tianba stood at the center, no longer pretending the dispute was about bidding etiquette or family pride. He demanded the Spirit King fragment and Dragonblood's sacred grass immediately. Lingyan crossed her arms and laughed at the idea of the Yang family ambushing the marquis household openly inside the capital. Yang Tianba claimed the five ancient families did not bow even to royalty, much less fear the Chu clan. Then he ordered Chu Feng and Lingyan to kneel 3 times before surrendering the treasures. If they refused, he threatened to kill them. Chu Feng responded by patting the storage bag and inviting Yang Tianba to take the treasures himself if his arms could reach. The insult erased what remained of the Yang heir's restraint. He ordered more than a dozen family elites to attack from every direction. The weakest members of the group were already high-level cultivators, while several carried power reaching into Golden Core. Their formation closed around Chu Feng, Lingyan, and Qingyao with practiced coordination. Chu Feng did not retreat from the street. With the Yang family's formation closing around them, Chu Feng planted his feet beside Lingyan and refused to surrender a single treasure.